Такой, да? Давай. Не, ну надо собрать, не входит. Нормально? Только что у вас камера это нам не мешал. Что я его локтем уже задел. Отлично, все, идеально, вперед.
Journalism in times of fake news. How are opinions and digital identities formed online? And how can users' trust be regained? Discuss and influence. Experience the future of media. Creating relations money can't buy. At the Deutsche Welle Global Media Forum 2017. The place made for minds.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our moderator, the editor-in-chief of the Deutsche Welle, Ines Pohl.
What a great opening with Aida Ganulan and Konstantin Manek on the accordion and cello. Thank you so much. This should be the spirit of today's beginning of the Global Media Forum. Liebe Bundestagsabgeordnete, liebe Ministerpräsidentin, liebe Ehrenträger, dear excellences, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's really an honor to welcome you to the 10th edition of our DW's Global Media Forum here in Bonn. This year, we choose the title Identity and Diversity for our forum, as we do experience all around the world that the diversity which comes with the globalized world can easily be used to threaten people and stir up a very unhealthy new nationalism. I should mention that you can get this translated. We have 3 different channels. Number 1 is English, number 2 is German, and number 3 is French. You also are very welcome to, exactly here, it's behind me, thank you, sir. You also should really tweet and share your ideas and your comments under the hashtag DW_GMF. We would love to join the conversation with you also on our social media platforms. We will discuss all these topics today and many more questions in various formats, in big panels and small discussion groups, or just over a cup of tea or coffee, or maybe a cold Kölsch. This is the local beer, and after all, we are in Germany, right? So let the Global Media Forum begin with a very warm welcome for Peter Limbourg, our General Manager, for his opening speech.
Thank you very much, Ines. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin our conference, I would like us to remember a great German and European who passed away on Friday. Helmut Kohl was Germany's Chancellor for 16 years, from 1982 until 1998. We are gathered here in the former Parliament chamber of the Federal Republic of Germany. This location is strongly linked to Helmut Kohl. It was here where he was sworn into office. In the building nearby, the old Wasserwerk, he presented his plan for unification of Germany. And it was here that he argued, in this room, for the unity of Europe. As a young journalist, I have held Helmut Kohl to account, sometimes critically. I have interviewed him many times, and I saw him during party conventions, his travels, and in background briefings. And we also met several times after his last term as Chancellor and in the recent years. I'm very grateful for this relationship. It taught me a lot. Helmut Kohl has accomplished the unification of Germany. He's the only European citizen of honor, and he stands for a policy of peace. He stands for the values which unite us here at the Global Media Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for a moment of remembrance for Helmut Kohl. Thank you very much. So now we start. Dear Ministerin Brigitte Zypries, Lord Mayor Ashok, Sridharan, Assistant Director General Frank La Rue of UNESCO, Excellencies, distinguished guests and partners of DW, ladies and gentlemen. 10 years ago, the first Global Media Forum took place here in Bonn. Those were relatively quiet times. There had been no financial crisis, no bloody disintegration of large parts of the Arab world, no streams of refugees coming to Europe. There was no war in the Ukraine. Nationalism was a relatively marginal occurrence. Donald Trump controlled a TV show and not nuclear codes. Brexit was the vision of only a small minority. Well, Vladimir Putin talked about a confrontation with the West for the first time at the Munich Security Conference. And Tayyip Erdogan was concentrating on the economic growth of his country, not scheming to turn Turkey into dictatorship without freedom of press. Today, we find ourselves in turbulent times, which also has consequences for our work. International broadcasting is experiencing a renaissance. There is a direct connection between the extent of national oppression and the usage of international broadcasters. Those who are perceived as being reliable sources are at a clear advantage. They will prevail in the long run. As the number of conflicts and crises increase, so does the importance of international broadcasters. This entails a growing responsibility for comprehensive, objective reporting. International broadcasters should never take sides, with only one exception, when it comes to human rights. Our main job is to inform. Our listeners, readers and viewers rely on us. We want to enable them to make better decisions based on our information, to improve their understanding of the world. To make one thing absolutely clear, the media are not the enemy of the people. We are working in the people's interest. And I have a message, and we all should have this message for all despots, autocrats, and dictators. You will not oppress freedom of speech forever. Freedom of speech is stronger than you are. Any ruler who chokes freedom of the press will fail on the long run. People want more than prosperity and security. They also want freedom and justice. That is what we are at DW are working for. And we are also demanding President Erdogan to release the German-Turkish journalist Deniz Yüksel and the other hundreds of journalists imprisoned in Turkey. Ladies and gentlemen, media also has to promote the exchange of ideas and build bridges, even between seemingly unbridgeable positions. Those who stop the dialogue are basically capitulating. Journalists have to maintain the dialogue even when the issues are neither easy or match their own worldview. The media need to have the will to change, to admit their own mistakes and deal with criticism. And I'm deeply convinced that we need fewer sad stories about what doesn't work and more motivating stories about what does work, about people everywhere in the world who are moving something along and bringing about positive change, especially in Africa. Yes, we are witnessing one of the worst famines in South Sudan. We have to report on this much more maybe than we did before. And yes, all exists in Africa. But there are also enormous opportunities for that continent through digitalization. There is strong economic growth, and there are so many people who are working on improving their living conditions. This is something we need to reflect in our reporting. We at DW want to adjust even more to our partners in the future. We want to cooperate more closely and offer them more content. Especially when it comes to news, we can be very helpful to our reliable partners by supplying them with daily video reports from around the world, Europe and Germany, and by offering more live TV interviews from Berlin, Frankfurt or Bonn. International interest in Germany is growing, and it is going to grow in the coming months. Who will win the federal elections? Will Mrs. Merkel carry on, or will Mr. Schulz take over? What will Germany's policy be in the future? In the financial sector, the economy, Europe, the environment? What about our alliances, refugees policies, and development aid? These topics are of great interest to many people around the world, and DW is paying attention to these interests. During the next 3 days, we will be talking about digitalization, the changes that come with it, the problems, and even the danger it poses. But we should not forget the outstanding opportunities. Digitalization is much more than the darknet pools of data and propaganda. For journalists, digitalization, first and foremost, means the direct links to our users. Today, a successful media company must understand social media as a distinct medium. For international broadcasters, social media offer the great opportunity to reach out to our users directly on their mobile phones. We can reach many more people with our content, if it is objective and relevant. Allow me to thank our sponsors and allow me to thank the organizers of this conference, particularly for the many innovations they have introduced to the Global Media Forum, which hopefully you'll like in the coming days. My heartfelt thanks to Guido Schmitz, Patrick Leusch and their team. Ladies and gentlemen, the Global Media Forum is not the only one celebrating an anniversary. 10 years ago, the first iPhone was introduced. Since then, there have been enormous changes. Media usage has been revolutionized, and the pace of innovation has dramatically increased. So we will have to take an effort to keep up. Let's use these 3 days in Bonn to learn from each other, but also to have fun and inspiration. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Peter Limbourg, for these really encouraging words. Freedom of speech is stronger. I think we should take that deep into our journalistic hearts, and that we also should focus on good news, on so-called constructive journalism, not only on the bad news. I think this is something we will discuss in several panels and forums. Now it's my great honor to welcome Ashok Sridharan. He's probably one of the best mayors in Germany to speak about the fact that diversity should be celebrated these days, especially as we see trends of showing an increasing fear of the unknown. Welcome, with a warm applause, the mayor of the city of Bonn.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Pohl. Assistant Director General La Rue, Federal Minister Zypries, Peter Limbourg, esteemed representatives of media all over the world, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Bonn. Welcome to a city in the Rhineland where people are warm-hearted, cheerful and quite aware of their identity. And welcome to our cosmopolitan and very diverse location, Germany's United Nations city and hub for international debates. You have just been listening to a wonderful musical interlude presented by the musicians of our annual Beethoven Festival here in Bonn. Bonn cherishes the spirit of our great composer, not only for his divine music, but also for the message of peace, understanding, and multilateralism conveyed in particular by the Ninth Symphony and his famous Ode to Joy. Bonn's identity was formed in our history of 2000 years and is imprinted in our cultural heritage. And part of Bonn's identity is precisely our great diversity, 179 nations living together in a colorful blend of cultures, religions, ages, orientations, and lifestyles. Bonn is also very diverse in topics and structures. Our identity is shaped by a common goal: internationality and sustainability. Sustainability is diverse and inclusive in the sense of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Bonn is very proud to be called a powerhouse for sustainable development. The dense network of international organizations, public authorities, scientific institutions, enterprises, and NGOs make Bonn an excellent place for generations. While UN Bonn is the heart, the engine, and the driver of this movement, the media can be called its lung. The world is in turmoil and at every angle of our globe. We are facing political instability, injustice, conflicts, crisis, and despotism. We are facing environmental and social challenges to an unknown extent. In these challenging times, it is the media that defend the identity of societies and our diversity. This includes the identity of minorities and the recognition of evidence, but also the diversity of opinions and the diversity of lifestyles and decisions. There is no reason for state leaders to be afraid of diverging opinions in a democratic society. Governments suppressing these opinions may be fighting journalists at first sight. However, actually, it is the facts, evidence, and freedom they are fighting. In the climate context, the world has just witnessed a major decision to suppress evidence. At this point, I speak up in the presence of the media of the world in my capacity as first Vice President of ICLE, Local Governments for Sustainability. In the moment when national governments foster injustice or step back from global arrangements, local and subnational governments will hold on to our inclusive approach and to our ambition, which we will demonstrate this fall when we welcome the 23rd UN Climate Summit in Bonn. Bonn and the state of North Rhine-Westphalia will take the lead by convening a summit of local and regional leaders during this COP. And we will send out one strong signal. We will go ahead, and we will be going further. And this is exactly what journalists all over the world will do. In times of restrictions, oppression, and persecution, they will not keep their mouth shut, their writing tamed, and their screens cleared of provocation. To the contrary, they will keep going. It is with humble appreciation that I thank the courageous media staff all over the world today. Thank you for unveiling, for mobilizing, for adding perspectives, for warning, for provoking, for putting yourself at risk, and for going further, regardless of the price you have to pay. And it is with disrespect and anger that I blame all those who fight diversity, who want to change our identity, those who stand against freedom and democracy. The Global Media Forum has profiled as an international stage for the role and future of the media. It has turned out to be a powerful think tank and also serves as a seismograph. Thank you to Deutsche Welle, to Peter Limbourg for hosting this forum and for lending a stage to courage and passion. Thank you, Patrick Leusch, for your creative approach and great dedication. My best wishes to this forum. Thanks a lot.
We will go ahead and we will go further. Didn't I tell you that these one of the best mayors in Germany? Thank you very much for these encouraging words. It's my honor and my pleasure to welcome Brigitte Zypries. She's the Minister for Economics and Energy. She actually has seen many, many politicians and journalists come and go as she's in public service for more than 20 years. She always has been kind of in the front row when it came to new technology and the question how this is shaping our society. I'm very excited to hear your take on the importance of digitalization. And allow me to mention that Brigitte Zypries is actually the first woman holding the office as Minister for Economics and Energy in Germany. That's also pretty great. The stage is yours. Brigitte Zypries.
Thank you very much, Ines Pohl. Ladies and gentlemen, the only thing which is not really great is that my speech is going to be in German. So anyone who wants to follow me and does not understand German, please use your headphones now. I didn't know that, actually. So, Exzellenzen, sehr geehrter Herr La Rue, Herr Oberbürgermeister, lieber Herr Limbourg, meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, für diese 3 Tage des Mediaforums haben Sie sich eine beeindruckende Agenda von aktuellen Fragestellungen vorgenommen. Und ganz viele davon sind auch eng verknüpft mit der digitalen Revolution, die unsere Gesellschaft und unsere Wirtschaft fundamental umkrempelt gerade. Sie haben es schon erwähnt, seit 10 Jahren erst haben wir das iPhone und in diesen 10 Jahren ist so viel passiert. Die Digitalisierung ist natürlich ein globales Phänomen und deswegen ist die Zusammenarbeit auf internationaler Ebene auch so dringend notwendig. Und sie muss natürlich auch über den Rahmen der Europäischen Union hinausgehen. Deshalb habe ich im April erstmals die Digitalminister der G20 nach Düsseldorf eingeladen, um mit ihnen zu besprechen, wie wir auf dieser Ebene weiter vorangehen. Die Gruppe der G20, meine Damen und Herren, steht für 2/3 der Weltbevölkerung und für 90% des BIPs weltweit. Unnötig zu sagen, dass das Thema Digitalisierung unbedingt in diesen Kreis gehört. Unser gemeinsames Ziel war, einen Handlungsrahmen zu entwickeln, damit alle Menschen die Chancen der Digitalisierung bestmöglich nutzen können. Haben wir einiges erreicht. So haben wir zum Beispiel vereinbart, dass bis 2025 alle Menschen an das Internet angebunden werden sollen. Dazu braucht es natürlich einen Ausbau der Netze. Und der zweite Punkt ist, wir haben vereinbart, mit Hochdruck daran zu arbeiten, dass die digitale Kluft zwischen den Geschlechtern überwunden wird. Bereits heute sind 250 Millionen Frauen weniger online als Männer. Ohne politische Maßnahmen könnte sich diese Schere in den nächsten 3 Jahren um weitere 100 Millionen öffnen. Es besteht also dringender Handlungsbedarf, damit Frauen und Männer gleichermaßen von den Vorteilen des digitalen Wandels profitieren können. Meine Damen und Herren, bei diesem Prozess sind alle G20-Staaten gefordert. Ich möchte mich heute aber auf die Frage konzentrieren, wo stehen wir in Deutschland im Digitalisierungsprozess? Welche Herausforderungen liegen vor uns, insbesondere in der Medienbranche? Letzte Woche war der diesjährige Digitalgipfel, das jährliche Klassentreffen der IT-Industrie, Politik und Wissenschaft in Deutschland in Ludwigshafen. Und Deutschland hat, das haben uns auch alle bestätigt, in dieser Legislaturperiode gute Fortschritte bei der digitalen Transformation gemacht. Gerade beim Thema Industrie 4.0 ist die deutsche Wirtschaft ganz vorne. Wir haben eine Plattform Industrie 4.0 eingerichtet, bei der über 300 Akteure aus Wissenschaft, aus Wirtschaft und Politik zusammen sind. Und mit dieser Plattform ist es uns gelungen, das Know-how zu bündeln und den Weg in die digital vernetzte Industrieproduktion deutlich voranzubringen. Industrie 4.0 versteht man inzwischen sowohl in den USA als auch in China. Aber natürlich gibt es auch noch viel zu tun in Deutschland und das gilt vor allen Dingen auch für das Thema digitale Infrastruktur. Wir hatten uns vorgenommen, 50 Mbit für jeden bis Ende diesen Jahres. Das werden wir auch schaffen, aber das ist natürlich viel zu wenig. Industrie 4.0 funktioniert nicht mit 50 Mbit. Deswegen brauchen wir, wenn wir das autonome Fahren voranbringen wollen, wenn wir telemedizinische Anwendungen voranbringen wollen, dringend einen ordentlichen Glasfaserausbau. Und die Devise muss hier lauten: Vorfahrt für Investitionen. Da wir die Digitalisierung nicht aufhalten können, wie manche ja immer noch glauben, glaube ich persönlich, ist es das Beste, wenn man sich an die Spitze der Bewegung setzt und versucht, sie so gut wie möglich zu gestalten. Denn natürlich, jede Branche, jeder Bereich unserer Gesellschaft ist davon betroffen und deswegen ist es wichtig, dass wir Rahmen setzen. Oft werden ja die Probleme und die Gefahren ganz nach vorne gestellt. Ich persönlich glaube, dass es immer besser ist, die Chancen zu sehen und diese Chancen dann eben auch zu gestalten. Wir werden Digitalisierung beispielsweise nutzen können, um unseren Übergang zu erneuerbaren Energien besser hinzubekommen. Smart Grids sind das Thema, um das es geht, wenn wir von fossilen Großkraftwerken zu dezentraler Erzeugung mit erneuerbaren Energien bessere Abstimmungen hinkriegen wollen, wenn wir Stromfluss besser organisieren wollen. Und selbstverständlich wird es auch für die Menschen in abgelegenen Regionen besser sein, wenn sie in den Genuss digitaler Behandlungsmethoden kommen können. Wir haben ja heute schon Probleme in Deutschland, auf dem Land noch Ärzte zu bekommen. Da kann man mit Telemedizin eine Menge aushelfen. Und auch ansonsten gibt es viele Anwendungen, gerade im medizinischen Bereich, die eine deutliche Verbesserung der Behandlungssituation versprechen. Fundamental, meine Damen und Herren, sind die Veränderungen auch für die Medienbranche. Der Umbruch ist dort kein rein technischer Vorgang. Er beeinflusst auch massiv die Meinungs- und Pressefreiheit und damit die Grundpfeiler unserer Demokratie. Und wie oft in der Geschichte löst der Wandel eben auch Abwehrreflexe und Widerstand aus. Immer wieder gab es in der Vergangenheit noch mehr, aber auch noch in der Gegenwart Rufe nach einem Schutzraum für die etablierten Medien, um sie vor neuen Formaten und Plattformen im Internet zu schützen. Aber beim Thema Medien geht es nicht nur um die Printpresse. Das Festival in Cannes hat beispielsweise vor 4 Wochen entschieden, dass nur noch Filme im Wettbewerb laufen dürfen, die anschließend auch im Kino gezeigt werden. Das ist eine klare Entscheidung gegen Netflix und Co. Und man kann sich fragen, ob das wirklich der richtige Weg ist. Der Versuch, krampfhaft an traditionellen Verwertungsmodellen und Wertschöpfungsketten festzuhalten, hat sich in der Vergangenheit wenigstens als nicht sehr erfolgreich herausgestellt. Die allermeisten Verlage nehmen deshalb heute auch die Herausforderung der Digitalisierung an und sie kommen mit innovativen Bezahlmodellen jetzt dem Ziel einer Monetarisierung ihrer Leistungen im Internet immer ein Stück weit näher. Das war ja, glaube ich, ein Anfangsfehler, der da gemacht wurde, dass man so suggeriert hat, im Internet ist alles frei und dann erst hinterher auf die Idee gekommen ist, naja, irgendwo mit müssen wir ja auch noch unser Geld verdienen. Und da sind wir aber, glaube ich, in einer guten Veränderungssituation. Der Vorreiter bei dem Thema ist in Deutschland sicherlich der Axel Springer Verlag, der bei seinen Flaggschiff-Zeitungen Bild und Welt inzwischen 421.000 digitale Abonnenten hat. Dafür, dass die Bild ja kein Abonnentenblatt ist, ist das schon ein ganz ordentlicher Wert. Und Springer, denke ich, hat den Umbau auch ansonsten geschafft. 2016 sind fast 3/4 des operativen Gewinns und 4/5 der Werbeerlöse aus dem Digitalgeschäft gekommen. Das heißt, es ist im Grunde heute ein Digitalkonzern. Auch andere große Medien wie der Spiegel oder die FAZ ziehen jetzt mit eigenen Bezahlangeboten im Netz nach. Und ich denke, das macht für uns alle Hoffnung, dass Qualitätsjournalismus auch im Netz eine wirtschaftliche Basis findet. Was das Thema Filme angeht, denke ich, kann es keinen Zweifel geben, dass es inzwischen High-End-Produktionen auch außerhalb der klassischen Kinoverwertungen gibt. Deshalb haben wir uns im Bundeswirtschaftsministerium ganz bewusst dafür entschieden, die Produktion von Filmen in Deutschland unabhängig von der Verwertung zu fördern. Wir haben den German Motion Picture Fund gegründet und damit unterstützen wir hochwertige Serienproduktionen und andere neue Formate. Denn wir meinen, kulturelles Schaffen und kreative Leistungen hängen nicht an der traditionellen Verwertungskette. Und ich glaube auch, dass wir gemeinsam sagen müssen, wenn Deutschland auch in Zukunft ein herausragender Standort für die Kultur- und Kreativwirtschaft sein soll, dann müssen wir uns neuen Verwertungsmodellen und anderen Trägermedien öffnen. Das geht gar nicht anders. Meine Damen und Herren, technologisch müssen wir offen sein. Aber inhaltlich dürfen wir keine Kompromisse machen. Journalismus gehört zur Demokratie, sagte die Moderatorin Pina Atali einmal sehr treffend. Und deshalb müssen wir deutlich machen, was gut recherchierter Qualitätsjournalismus ist. Das habe ich irgendwo auf Facebook gelesen, ist eben nicht das Gleiche wie das habe ich in der Zeit oder in der Süddeutschen gelesen oder auf der Deutschen Welle gehört. Die Herausforderung ist, den technischen Wandel der Medienwelt positiv zu gestalten, ohne bei den Inhalten Abstriche zu machen. Und dazu müssen wir die richtigen Rahmenbedingungen für Unternehmen und Beschäftigte setzen und mit der neuen Diskussionskultur in den sozialen Medien umgehen. Neue Ideen und neue Technologien verdanken wir vor allen Dingen neuen Spielern am Markt. Und damit komme ich zum Thema Startups und zu dem Gedanken, dass es sowohl für die industrielle Gesellschaft und für die Industrie gilt, als auch für die Medienwelt. Wer sein ganzes Berufsleben damit zugebracht hat, ein bestimmtes Tool jedes Jahr ein kleines bisschen besser zu machen, der kann dann im zarten Alter von 60 Jahren nicht mehr disruptiv denken. Ich wenigstens würde das von mir sagen und ich glaube, man kann das auch von anderen sagen. Und deswegen ist die Förderung von Start-ups und jungen Unternehmen eine der wichtigsten wirtschaftspolitischen Aufgaben zurzeit. Wir müssen sehen, dass das Potenzial, was wir an jungen Leuten haben, die einfach ganz anders an die Themen rangehen, als wir es tun, dass wir das fördern, um dann beide Teile wiederum zusammenzubringen. Das ist die Aufgabe, um die es für meine Begriffe geht. Wir haben bei der Finanzierung von Start-ups in dieser Legislaturperiode große Fortschritte gemacht. Wichtige Förderprogramme sind ausgebaut worden. 2 Milliarden Euro an frischen öffentlichen Mitteln stehen da jetzt zur Verfügung. Und auch das Engagement des privaten Sektors in Deutschland hat in den letzten Jahren sehr zugenommen. Das gilt natürlich für die großen DAX 30, aber das gilt auch für die Medienbranche. Axel Springer Plug and Play ist einer der großen. Genauso wie der Venture Capital Fonds von Bertelsmann, der inzwischen 180 Millionen Dollar schwer ist. Aber Finanzierung, meine Damen und Herren, ist eben nicht alles. Startups und etablierte Unternehmen müssen dann auch miteinander in Kontakt kommen und das muss man auch organisieren. Die Jungen bringen die Ideen mit, Entschuldigung, ich habe das hier genau falsch rumstehen. Die Jungen bringen die Ideen mit, sie bringen den völlig anderen Antritt mit, sie bringen mehr Offenheit mit und die Etablierten bringen ihre Erfahrung mit, ihre Kontakte mit. Sie können vermitteln, was dann geschehen kann mit dem, was andere entwickeln. Das muss man zusammenbringen. Wir haben dafür Startup Nights gegründet in unserem Ministerium, haben das branchenspezifisch gemacht, was ich nur zur Nachahmung empfehlen kann und was es ja inzwischen auch in vielen Städten gibt, wahrscheinlich auch bei Ihnen, Herr Oberbürgermeister. Für die Rahmenbedingungen im Medienbereich, meine Damen und Herren, geht es dazu um das Thema, wie kann ich kreative Leistungen angemessen vergüten? Es ist ein uraltes Thema. Schon als Bundesministerin der Justiz habe ich mich damit rumgeschlagen und längst vor mir sein Buch Die Leiden des jungen Werthers war eigentlich das erste große Schwarzkopierthema. Das war so beliebt damals, dass ganz viele das abschrieben und weitergaben. Kopien gab es ja noch keine. Wir haben dann im Justizministerium gesagt, was man nicht verbieten kann, sollte man vergüten und haben darüber ein System entwickelt von kommunizierenden Röhren, im Urheberrecht, und das ist auch in dieser Legislaturperiode erstens noch gültig, aber zweitens auch überarbeitungsbedürftig. In dieser Legislaturperiode gibt es allerdings vor allen Dingen Aufreger zurzeit wegen der Bildungsregel, der Frage, was stellt man frei für Bildungsformate. Und in der Filmindustrie gibt es eine große Aufregung angesichts des Vorschlags der Europäischen Kommission für die Online-Verwertung von Filmen in Mediatheken. Diese geplante EU-Verordnung sieht vor, dass eine Lizenz, die für einen Sender in einem EU-Staat vergeben wurde, künftig für die ganze Europäische Union gilt. Ein System nach dem Motto, kaufe eine Lizenz und bekomme 27 bzw. 26 dafür frei, kann für meine Begriffe nicht funktionieren. Es würde die Kreativen unverhältnismäßig benachteiligen, und deshalb lehnen wir eine solche Einschränkung des Territorialprinzips ab. Genau, jetzt müssen alle die klatschen, die davon betroffen sind. Meine Damen und Herren, die Digitalisierung verändert die Medienbranche grundlegend, aber am Ende des Tages gilt doch, kreative Leistungen lassen sich nur begrenzt digitalisieren. Ohne Menschen geht es nicht. Die Kultur- und Kreativwirtschaft ist inzwischen eine Branche, die es gemessen an der Zahl der Erwerbstätigen mit dem Maschinenbau oder der Automobilindustrie aufnehmen kann. Wir haben rund 250.000 Unternehmen mit über 1 Million Erwerbstätigen in diesen 11 verschiedenen Branchen der Kultur- und Kreativwirtschaft. Und die Quote der Selbstständigen ist mit 23% außergewöhnlich hoch. Zu diesen 11 Teilbranchen gehören in jeder Branche einige, die sehr gut verdienen. Aber es gibt eben auch gerade in diesen Branchen viele, die in prekären finanziellen Verhältnissen leben. Deshalb ist es gut, dass wir in dieser Legislaturperiode den Kreis derjenigen, die als Auftraggeber in die Künstlersozialkasse einzahlen müssen, deutlich verbreitert haben. Die Künstlersozialkasse ist damit weiter zukunftsfest gemacht worden und gibt für diejenigen, die nicht aus Deutschland sind und das System nicht kennen, gibt denjenigen, die als selbstständige Künstler arbeiten, eine Altersversorgung. Und gerade für die noch nicht so Erfolgreichen gilt ganz besonders, man muss sichtbar werden. Dabei hilft das Internet, aber dabei hilft auch die jährliche Prämierung unserer 32 Kultur- und Kreativpiloten oder unser Wirtschaftsfilmpreis, also verschiedene Formate, mit denen wir Kultur- und Kreativmenschen sichtbar machen. Meine Damen und Herren, es sind ja nicht nur technologische und wirtschaftliche Herausforderungen, auch die Informations- und Diskussionskultur im Internet macht uns im Hinblick auf den demokratischen Diskurs Sorgen. Auf der Liste der Meldungen, die am häufigsten in sozialen Netzwerken geteilt wurden, standen im letzten Jahr 2 aus dem US-Wahlkampf ganz oben. Das eine ist, dass der Papst sich für Donald Trump als Präsident ausgesprochen habe. Und das andere, dass Hillary Clinton den IS finanziere. Beides sind ganz offensichtlich Fake News. Ich will nicht darüber spekulieren, wie groß der Einfluss dieser Fake News auf den Wahlausgang tatsächlich war. Aber natürlich, Twitter und Facebook haben eine Rolle beim Wahlsieg von Donald Trump gespielt. Und in Deutschland kann man fragen, ob der Aufstieg von Pegida und AfD ohne Facebook in dieser Form möglich gewesen wäre. Aber umgekehrt gilt natürlich auch, die Erfolge von Barack Obama und Emmanuel Macron wären auch nicht denkbar gewesen ohne diese sozialen Medien. Digitale Technologien bieten nach meiner Überzeugung große Chancen zur besseren Information, zu mehr politischer Beteiligung und zu mehr Freiheit. Die Ergebnisse dieser Freiheit mögen uns manchmal nicht gefallen. Das müssen wir aushalten. Denn das ist nun einmal Demokratie, allerdings mit 2 Einschränkungen. Zum einen gibt es ganz klare Grenzen des Rechtsstaats gegenüber unwahren Tatsachenbehauptungen und rechtswidrigem Hate Speech. Und zum anderen muss eine Demokratie nach meiner festen Überzeugung nicht nur Wahrheit und Würde in der Auseinandersetzung mit den Mitteln des Rechtsstaats verteidigen, sie muss auch für die Tugend der Offenheit gegenüber anderen Meinungen werben. Toleranz, die Fähigkeit zur Auseinandersetzung mit anderen Weltbildern und der Respekt vor anderen Meinungen gehören für mich zentral in jedes Schulcurriculum. Eine besondere Herausforderung für den Diskurs ist das Problem von Echokammern und Filterblasen. Immer mehr Menschen, vor allen Dingen Junge, informieren sich ausschließlich über solche Medien oder YouTube-Kanäle, die auf ihrer Meinung liegen. Das ist deshalb so gefährlich, weil die Demokratie vom Meinungsstreit lebt. Es geht ja immer um das bessere Konzept für eine Stadt, für ein Land, wenn man sich demokratisch streitet darüber, wer soll bestimmen, was hier geschieht in unserem Gemeinwesen. Und dafür ist es aber nötig, dass man den Standpunkt des anderen kennt und sich damit auseinandersetzen kann, denn sonst kann man ja gar nicht bewerten, was ist eigentlich besser für uns alle. Das ist aber genau die Gefahr, wenn Menschen in Echokammern der sozialen Netzwerke feststecken. Dann hören sie eben nur noch das und sehen nur noch das, was ihre eigene Meinung bestätigt und kriegen anderes nicht mehr mit. Verstehen Sie mich nicht falsch, natürlich gehört zur Freiheit auch, dass man sich selbst medial in solchen Kammern einschließt. Aber die Komplexität des 21. Jahrhunderts bewältigt man damit auf alle Fälle mal nicht. Wir dürfen deshalb nicht zulassen, dass Medien pauschal als Fake- und Systemmedien kritisiert werden. Das untergräbt die Streitkultur in einer Demokratie und wir müssen sehen, dass wir möglichst alles tun, um diese Streitkultur wieder nach oben zu bringen, dass es wieder selbstverständlich wird, dass man sich sachlich austauscht, ohne sich persönlich zu beleidigen. Dieses Thema passt für mich auch zum Motto des globalen Medienforums Identität und Vielfalt. Ich denke, das wird eines der Themen sein, die Sie hier auch in den nächsten Tagen behandeln. Meine Damen und Herren, die Gestaltung unseres Lebens in der digitalisierten Welt hat gerade erst begonnen. Das gilt für die Gestaltung der Plattformökonomie, für die wir faire Regeln brauchen und in die wir unsere Sozialversicherungssysteme integrieren müssen. Das gilt für Standards bei Industrie 4.0, wo wir sicherstellen müssen, dass die Geräte miteinander reden können, damit sich nicht einzelne Monopole bilden. Und es gilt für die Arbeit 4.0 und da sowohl für das individuelle Arbeitsrecht als auch für das kollektive Arbeitsrecht, für die Frage, was wird eigentlich aus Betriebsräten in dieser veränderten Arbeitswelt und wie findet Mitbestimmung eigentlich noch statt. Und es gilt natürlich auch für die Medien, für ihre Produktionsbedingungen wie für ihre Rezeption. Eine komplexe Welt braucht kritische Analyse, gefasst in klare, respektvolle Sprache. Daran müssen wir gemeinsam arbeiten und dann ist mir auch um die Zukunft eines guten Journalismus nicht bange. Ich danke für die Aufmerksamkeit.
Frau Zypries, herzlichen Dank. Es ist immer toll, wenn Politikerinnen und Politiker kürzer sprechen als angekündigt. Es gibt uns nämlich noch die Chance, ein paar Fragen zu stellen. Sie dürfen auch im Publikum fragen. Es gibt Saalmikrofone. Sie können gerne auf Englisch fragen. Wir machen deswegen der Übersetzung auf Deutsch weiter, sonst geht es hin und her. Frau Zypries, ich habe es erwähnt, Sie haben wirklich viel Erfahrung, auch was Bundestagswahlkämpfe anbelangt. Was ist die größte Herausforderung für diesen Wahlkampf, wenn es zu der Digitalisierung und zu Social Media kommt?
Naja, das, worüber wir im Zusammenhang mit dem amerikanischen Wahlkampf jetzt oft gesprochen haben, nämlich die Frage, wie stellen wir sicher, dass wir nicht durch gefälschte Nachrichten in Richtung getrieben werden oder Meinungen gemacht werden, die nicht der Wahrheit entsprechen oder die nicht dem Diskurs entsprechen. Das ist, glaube ich, das Hauptproblem, dass man das rausfiltern muss und dass man einen Mechanismus entwickeln muss, der dann immer gleich sagt, das ist eine Falschnachricht. Also man wird es ja nicht verhindern können, dass es Falschnachrichten gibt, aber es gilt dann für alle eben deutlich zu machen, diese Nachricht ist falsch, glaubt es nicht. Das macht den Diskurs natürlich schwieriger.
Sie sind Regierungsmitglied, Kabinettsmitglied. Wie wird es denn diskutiert? Hat die Regierung Angst, dass Russland sich einmischt, unmittelbar mit Fake News oder andere Länder?
Im Rahmen der Regierung, im Rahmen des Kabinetts diskutieren wir das nicht. Das diskutiert jede Partei für sich, weil das ja kein Regierungswahlkampf ist, sondern es ist ja ein Parteienwahlkampf und ein Parteienstreit. Und deswegen wird das immer dort in den Parteien diskutiert, dass es da Besorgnisse gibt, dass sich da andere einmischen, die vielleicht mit Deutschland nichts zu tun haben. Das wird man sicherlich nicht in Abrede stellen können.
Vielen Dank. Gibt es Fragen aus dem Publikum? Bitte schön. So, microphone is coming. If you don't mind and introduce yourself briefly, we would very much appreciate that, so we know who is talking to us.
Ich soll Sie halten, ist okay.
Okay.
Guten Morgen, mein Name ist Andrea Nüsse von der Friedrich-Naumann-Stiftung für die Freiheit. Ich war jetzt etwas überrascht, Frau Zypries, dass Sie gar nichts zu dem Gesetzentwurf Ihres Kollegen Herrn Maas, des Justizministers, sagen, der ja für unsere ausländischen Gäste jetzt noch in diesen Tagen ein neues Gesetz durchsetzen will, um Facebook und Google in die Pflicht zu nehmen, was den Umgang mit Fake News angeht, was recht umstritten ist. Was ist Ihre persönliche Meinung, zumal als Ex-Justizministerin der Bundesrepublik?
Vielleicht kurz erläutern für unsere internationalen Gäste. Es geht also tatsächlich darum, wie Facebook kontrolliert werden kann, wenn es um Hate Speech geht. Soll es eine Art Zensur geben oder erklären Sie uns, um was es geht? Das ist aber eine These.
Geht es überhaupt gerade gar nicht.
Okay. Falsch verstanden.
Weil das so komplex ist und weil so viele ausländische Gäste hier sind, habe ich das auch rausgelassen. Ich habe das schon gesehen. Insofern ist es interessant, dass Sie gleich nachfragen. Facebook ist genauso wie Twitter verpflichtet, rechtswidrige Inhalte zu löschen. Es gibt überhaupt gar kein Problem bei der Frage von Kinderpornografie. Da funktioniert es sehr gut. Wir geben den jeweiligen Providern oder eben den sozialen Netzwerkbetreibern einen Hinweis von Seiten der Kriminalämter und es funktioniert sofort. Es funktioniert schwieriger bei rechtswidrigen Inhalten. Also, wenn ich beispielsweise die Vernichtung der Juden in Deutschland leugne, dann ist das in Deutschland strafrechtlich bewährt. Das ist es aber nicht überall. In Amerika beispielsweise ist es erlaubt, das zu sagen. Aber in Deutschland ist es eben verboten, weil wir da aufgrund unserer Historie andere Gesetze haben. Und diese Bewertung ist dann für einen international tätigen Konzern auch nicht immer einfach und die Reaktion auch nicht. Und dann sitzen da auch Menschen, die das vielleicht auch nicht in jedem Einzelfall überreißen, weil eigentlich verlangt man ja da auch, dass ein ausgebildeter Jurist da sitzt und nicht irgendjemand, der da angelernt wurde. Deswegen gab es immer wieder Kritik, dass Facebook insbesondere, aber auch Twitter da nicht schnell genug reagiert haben. Und mein Kollege Maas hat deshalb einen Gesetzentwurf jetzt entwickelt, wo eine besondere Verpflichtung drin steht, dass diese Social-Media-Betreiber eine hinreichende Zahl von Personen vorhalten müssen, die sich mit der Auseinandersetzung, mit der Kontrolle dieser rechtswidrigen Inhalte dann beschäftigen. Weil es eben es sind ja auch relativ viele Meldungen, die kommen und das ist natürlich für die auch ein Kostenfaktor. Ich habe mir sagen lassen, dass in Berlin da jetzt inzwischen 600 Personen sitzen, die das machen. Das ist ja dann auch auch ein ökonomischer Faktor für das Unternehmen. Und jetzt geht es halt um die Frage, wie schnell müssen die reagieren und was passiert, wenn sie es nicht so schnell machen. Und da hat Herr Maas mit hohen Bußgeldern gedroht und das hat dann dazu geführt, dass viele gesagt haben, das engt die Meinungsfreiheit zu sehr ein. Jeder wird dann eher erstmal eine Meinung löschen, weil er Angst hat, dass er ein Bußgeld kriegt. Das kann man so sehen und kann man so sehen. Ich möchte da jetzt inhaltlich nichts zu sagen. Das Gesetz ist ja, wie man weiß, sehr umstritten. Seit gestern hat sich auch die CDU-CSU davon verabschiedet, die erst unbedingt wollten, dass es kommt und Maas gedrängt haben, es zu machen, nach meiner Kenntnis. Und jetzt wird man sehen, was in den nächsten 2 Wochen noch passiert.
Aber was ist denn Ihre Meinung dazu? Also das ist ja durchaus eine monopolisierte Öffentlichkeit sozusagen. Dahinter stehen Großkonzerne, oder ein Großkonzern, die in allererster Linie Geld verdienen wollen. Sie als ehemalige Justizministerin und natürlich einfach auch als deutsche Bundespolitikerin. Muss da nicht was passieren, um die Menschen zu schützen?
Wen jetzt?
Letztendlich dann sage ich die Gesellschaft. Ne? Sie haben es ja selber entblättert in Ihrer Rede, dass ganz viele Menschen sich einfach nur noch in ihren eigenen kleinen Social Bubbles bewegen. Aber wenn da wirklich gezielt falsche Nachrichten, falsche Informationen verbreitet werden.
Naja, eine falsche Information ist erstmal nichts Strafbares. Also das muss man mal ganz klar sehen. Man muss da sehr unterscheiden zwischen dem, was dann tatsächlich strafbar ist oder was eine Beleidigung ist und damit strafbar wäre, und zwischen dem, was einfach nur eine bisschen krude Meinung ist. Ich meine, jeder kann seine krude Meinung haben, die darf ich dann nicht gleich, meine ich wenigstens, löschen und aus dem Netz entfernen. Es hat in unserem Staat jeder auch das Recht auf eine krude Meinung. Aber er darf eben keine Beleidigungen vornehmen und er darf keine strafbaren Handlungen vornehmen. Deswegen habe ich eben gerade das Beispiel mit der Behauptung gebracht, dass es keine Judenvernichtung in Deutschland gegeben hat. Das gibt es ja immer wieder, diese Auseinandersetzung. Da ist die Rechtslage jetzt klar. Das ist auf alle Fälle strafbar und nicht erlaubt, muss deshalb raus. Aber schwieriger wird es schon, wenn es anders formuliert ist, wenn es irgendwie um andere Themen vielleicht auch geht und wo man darüber streiten kann, ist das jetzt eine Beleidigung, ja oder nein. Und deswegen war mein Ansatz immer zu sagen, es ist vor allen Dingen, geht es da um das Strafverfolgungsinteresse des Staates. Das ist nämlich nun mal, das Strafmonopol ist beim Staat und deswegen muss man das, sollte man das auch dort belassen.
Vielen Dank, Frau Zypries. Jeder darf eine krude Meinung haben. Es ist ganz wichtig, dass man auf den Absender der Meinung guckt. Man kann gar nicht oft genug auf dw.com klicken und einfach wissen, wer die sozusagen die Inhalte und die Informationen auch wirklich liefert, bereitstellt.
Genau, und wer die Sachen einordnet.
Genau, wer sie einordnet und wie wichtig die Absenderkennung ist. Ganz, ganz herzlichen Dank für Ihren Input. Der Applaus ist Ihrer. Und um über alles jetzt noch mal ein bisschen nachzudenken und nachzufühlen, dürfen wir uns jetzt noch mal erfreuen an Konstantin Manek und Aida Ganullin mit ordentlicher, fetziger Musik. Wo sind sie? Sie kommen. Applaus! very much. I mean, what a proof that it's really worth coming to the Beethovenfest in September. Thank you so much. Wonderful music, great anthems. Okay, cool. Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Our today's keynote speaker is Frank La Rue. He's a Guatemalan labor and human rights law expert who has served as UN Special Rapporteur on the promotion and protection of the right of freedom and expression. Frank La Rue is the founder of the Center for Legal Action for Human Rights. Currently he serves as the Assistant Director General for Communication at the UNESCO. And he also fights for the right to be forgotten. The stage is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all the state officials of Germany, to the Lord Mayor, to our friends from the Deutsche Welle, and especially from the Media Development Forum, for this invitation and this participation. It's a big honor for me to represent the Director General of UNESCO and all our colleagues from communication and information in UNESCO today. I think it was very interesting to be invited to this forum on identity and diversity precisely because I am from Guatemala, from Latin America. I have a French name, I'm speaking in English, and we're having this meeting in Germany. So I thought it was very appropriate to talk about diversity at this moment. Buenos días a todos los latinoamericanos y las latinoamericanas que están aquí también. Let me begin by saying that identity and diversity obviously go hand in hand since the origins of humankind. We all began to develop our minds, our culture, our values individually, but also collectively, initially as a family, then as small society groups. And as humankind began to grow and establish itself because of the agriculture, we began to have very defined traits of those values, of those traditions. And as human beings began to sort of populate the earth and began to settle in further away spaces, the identity began growing different. Today, in the Atlas of Languages that we have under our sector as communication of the world, we have estimated that there is around 7,000 languages spoken in the world. Many of them disappearing because they don't have a written version, but many of them still very much alive and very vibrant. 7,000 languages. This means that we have 7,000 different cultures and peoples. This is diversity, and this is important. So we cannot deny the reality of diversity. We have to discover the benefit of this diversity. Obviously, the history of the world taught us that those differences made for many wars. Of course, there was conflicts. There were initially economic conflicts, land conflicts, or political conflicts. And we even had a 100-year war here in Europe. So yes, those differences oftentimes were being used as a legitimacy for many of the conflicts that probably had an economic or political origin. Tragically, humanity lived with these differences, oftentimes in conflict, but oftentimes solving them and negotiating them. But today, after we went in the 20th century through 2 world wars, we learned the lesson that we have to build peace among humanity, precisely looking at that difference as a tremendous wealth of our nations, and precisely building out of that difference, that diversity, a benefit for understanding. And this is where UNESCO grew, because UNESCO was established even 2 years before the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, established in 1946. And there's a beautiful phrase that I love in the Constitution of UNESCO that is even very poetic, that says, UNESCO is an institution established to reach peace and to engage in peace in the world by facilitating the free flow of ideas and knowledge amongst peoples of the world. This means that it is this free flow of ideas and knowledge that builds the understanding. And it is this understanding and respect that builds peace. So we link the communication, the freedom of expression, and the free flow of ideas and knowledge to the peace building and not to the offensiveness. And this is exactly the mission that we have and that we should all engage in. Very appropriate today in this meeting that we're looking at media development. This is exactly the role of media, of journalism, to facilitate information and knowledge. Not always an easy thing, not always friendly information, sometimes very critical information, and sometimes done in a very ironic way, like with cartoonists, but always valuable information. And this is the principle we're trying to defend. What are we building peace? How are we building peace with our means of communication? And tragically, I personally believe the world always moves forward. History never moves back. But in moving forward, we go like the quantum physics. We don't go in a straight line, we go in waves. And it's very clear that we're going through a downturn at this moment. A downturn because oftentimes we look at the world and we see how the world is engaging in friendly dialogue, in enhancing human rights, in looking at gender equity, in helping minorities or sectors of society and poverty. And today, we're looking at the emphasis on the opposite side. We have a rise in right-wing speeches that are trying to focus on the differences, trying to focus on the fear that these differences provoke, and trying to use fear as a political element for their campaigns and for their electoral campaigns. This is very damaging because this leads the world into a very serious position of conflict. Precisely the opposite of this sharing the information. And of course, many times, communicators, as many of you here, media directors, media workers, journalists, are the brunt of that violence. We have had 8 resolutions in the United Nations, 2 of them in the Security Council, several of them in the General Assembly, and many more at UNESCO in Paris, on the safety of journalists. And we still see the safety of journalists deteriorating progressively. More and more assassinations of journalists are increasing. We have in the statistics on online harassment, but specifically the most preoccupying phenomenon is that there's a dramatic increase on sexual harassment of women journalists. Some of them for political reasons, because they're doing research and investigation into topics that are very sensitive, zones of conflict, drug lords, or drug trafficking or organized crime. But some of them with no reason. Women that want to do journalism in sports are also getting harassed, because why should a woman try to be a journalist in the sport field? This is unheard of, and this is something we should not allow and should not permit. All these new realities are not due to the fact that journalism is playing a different role, or that technology and the use of internet is building a different role for journalism. No. All these aggressive attitudes are coming from the fact that we're living in a more intransigent society today. Now, of course, in the digital world, and I was very pleased to hear the Madam Minister speak before of economy and technology, these new technologies, when they came out, were going to be the big facilitator. Internet was going to give us all the access to speak freely and to be able to enjoy freedom of expression equally. But that has not been the case. As a matter of fact, the digital gap has increased because, and we have had this, just last week I was participating in the WISES meeting with our colleagues from the ITU in Geneva. We have to have a social policy toward the use of technologies. Of course we need technological development. And of course we will never, not only not stop technology, which we should not seek, we should engage in technological development. Technologies will always provoke good effects for humankind. But at the same time, we have to design the policies. We want 1 more million, in the Broadband Commission we have said 1 more million people around the world connected. Yes, but what is the selection process? Are these going to be urban population in developed nations, or are we looking for rural population in developing nations? Are we trying to facilitate development for others? Are we trying to seek gender equity on the internet or not? These are the challenges of our times. Technology at the service of whom? And I keep on insisting on our friends in the ITU is yes, connectivity, but also with content. The content is as important as the connectivity. We don't want children just playing video games over the internet. We want children learning, being able to have a common library that everyone can enjoy in all the languages of the world. This is the vision. We have evaluated, when I was rapporteur of freedom of expression, I evaluated a program called El Plan Ceibal in a small country in Uruguay, which were able to establish in every public school a Wi-Fi service provider, which was officially done by the state. So it would serve the children of the school, but it would also serve the community. And they had not been able to develop internet, but that was their solution to connectivity. But they began to establish their books, their textbooks, in digital form. They began to establish a digital library. So the smallest school in a rural area had the same library that the biggest school in their capital, Montevideo. It has been an enormous success for education. Of course, the criticism I hear always is that this is a small country with 3.5 million people. But I think it's the political determination of establishing these policies that counts. It's when you make the decision to begin and to apply these policies for the benefit of the population. Yes, of course, digitalization is also good for business. This is important. Yes, this is the sustainability of it. And there's nothing wrong with it. But we must combine it with policies of social benefit as well. We were talking last week about artificial intelligence, and someone said, well, this is inevitably going to provoke unemployment. But there's always winners and losers around the world. And I said, no. With the new technologies, we should make everyone a winner. We have to begin preventing the unemployment. As a matter of fact, the ILO is beginning to have a sort of a forecast of what can be done. Because if we allow huge segments of the population to lose their jobs, what we're going to create is a social crisis for all of us that will affect all society. This is the forecast. And this is a little bit the role we see ourselves as UNESCO's to adding the humanist element to technology, the human rights element to journalism and to freedom of expression, and the exercise of that freedom of expression. Now, today we have the benefit of having a new framework, which I strongly believe, the 2030 Agenda. And attached to that, we have the benefit of having the Paris Agreement. Believe it or not, today in the world, we still have political leaders of important nations trying to deny global warming. The global warming does not exist. Well, we're beginning to see already the effects. And of course, the small island states are beginning to panic of what can happen if the oceans keep on rising, or if the amount of storms or hurricanes or tsunamis keep on rising. And this is a very serious phenomenon. So in those goals, it's interesting, the level of combination with the issue of communication. This year, the high-level political forum in New York is going to analyze Goal 1, the eradication of poverty. And we keep on saying Goal 1 goes with communication as well, because obviously you need communication for enhancing the local work, the local markets, whatever people produce. But also, you need communication and access to information and transparency of governments to combat corruption, which is oftentimes one of the elements of poverty in many nations around the world. And if we don't combat corruption, and we don't give citizens the access to information, then we're never going to reach the goal of eradicating poverty. So that's a very direct link with the access to information policies, the ICTs, but also with the role of journalists and media, because those are the people that are investigating and denouncing corruption, oftentimes at the risk of their lives. And we have Goal 16, which I think it's interesting, it was left as one of the, almost the last goal, but it's the one that puts the basis for all development. Any society that wants to reach development has to be a society in peace. It says has to be inclusive of all its diversity and of all minorities and of gender equity, has to have access to information, has to have transparency, and has to guarantee, it says, public access to information. So today, public access to information is not only a human right, as part of freedom of expression, is not only a fundamental element for democracy, because that right to access information is what generates a strong citizenship and informed citizenship, but today is also recognized as a fundamental element for development. There can be no development if we don't guarantee access to information to all the population. This is crucial. And this enhances the role of these new technologies of communication, but it also ratifies the importance of the media and journalism as a fundamental profession in our world. Today, of course, everyone is looking at media as a profession in crisis, a financial crisis, because the new platforms have generated a new world, they said. And therefore, traditional journalism is in crisis. Well, this is true. We'll have to look at new forms of sustainability. In many parts of the world, journalists are forming cooperatives and trying to develop online media of their own. But the reality is that there will always be the need for serious investigative journalism and for quality journalism. I don't say necessarily for professional journalism, because there's a big debate going on in the world whether we should allow just journalists who have a degree. And I think we had to defend journalism by the service they provide. A journalist is the person, the woman or the man, who systematizes information, makes it understandable to transfer to a specific audience at a certain moment, and does that regularly. So this can be someone working in a community radio of indigenous peoples in any part of the world, or can be someone of a major newspaper or magazine in the world. Can be a television channel around the world, or it can be local radio stations or community little newspapers being published. Or it can be a blogger who regularly informs their social groups whom they link with. But it is the access to information which is what they are guaranteeing. Now, this is different than the irresponsible sharing of gossip. When the Oxford Dictionary talks about the post-truth era, what is happening is that the audience, I think, is changing, and we're becoming more engaged in activities that are satisfying as games. So it's easier just to open up a social network, exchange my views with my relatives, my friends, and generate a gossip circle, which I begin to believe is real news, and then take that as the reality of the day, regardless of whether it is confirmed or not. Now, also, there's disinformation campaigns. I don't quite like the term fake news, because I believe that fake news is normally used by those that initiated the use of it, by the way, and secondly, it is used to discredit the news, to believe that all news will be potentially a confusion or will be potentially misguiding. And this is not true. What we have today, and this is a serious threat to our political systems and electoral system, are clear disinformation campaigns, which are organized systematically. But this is not new in the world. This existed from before. It's just that they're using new technologies for that. And in that sense, they're trying to make us believe whatever they can about one candidate or another, about one position or another, or they generate fear between ethnic groups or religions or social groups around the world, which is part of the crisis that we're living in, on all sides. And this is very dangerous. This is one of the problems we have to address. Information, serious information, has to be ratified, but we have to investigate those that are massively presenting disinformation campaigns to control the attitude of people, to gain support for a candidate, normally a very racist and hardline candidate in many parts of the world. This is happening everywhere. I'm not thinking of any particular continent. And this is probably the biggest threat. So today, I believe that we're in the best of the moments to recognize this phenomenon. But in a forum like today, of media development, where we're talking about identity and diversity, we have to recognize that the media has to represent that identity and diversity. The values around the world are good values, and all the cultures of the world in general are good cultures. And there is exceptions to that when people try to make the differences violent and try to make the differences aggressive. And this is what we should not allow. And this is where we should confront all this disinformation campaign with clear information, with real information, with the truth. And I think ultimately this is what will benefit media. Recently I was reading about some poetry, and there was this poet who said, the only thing that is real in the world is art and truth. And truth is artistic and art is truth. And I believe that this is real. We have to go down to basics and find the beauty in the creativeness of humankind, but also the beauty in trying to be truthful. Because it's precisely by being truthful that we will find the benefit of all this free flow of information and communication. This is our challenge today, of building peace out of the diversity, of building peace of the differences by enhancing the knowledge and understanding and the communication we have amongst ourselves in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's all about content. It's all about truth, if I might sum it, your beautiful speech up. I have a question for you as we open the floor for a couple of questions, as we have another 5 minutes. You talked about the post-truth era. There are post-truth politicians. You've been in your job on public service for so many years. Could you talk a little bit about the changes and what that means, for journalists, for their work? How can you handle these post-truth politicians?
Well, one of the things that is happening in the world is that there's a denial of actions, and many people want to deny what they have done, but also many want to deny the past. There's a big debate going on in the world of recognition of the past. Your Minister of Economics mentioned it. Germany has gone a step ahead, which some people find a bit radical, like, for instance, criminalizing denial of Holocaust. But it is true that Germany has went through a tremendous effort for recognition of the past. In my own country, Guatemala, there was a refusal of recognition. We went through genocide in the 80s, just recently. And there was a huge attempt to make everyone recognize. And there's still an attitude of denial. And while there's an attitude of denial, it will be very difficult to reconcile a nation. And this is happening around the world today with many leaders that don't want to recognize their own history as a nation, as an ethnic group, as a society, or don't want to recognize their own mistakes as individuals. I always say that history is like our shadow. It will always go with us, no matter where we go. And I think that's beautiful. That's not bad, because we learn from it. We're shaped by it in the positive way. But it will always be there, and we can never deny it.
Thank you very much. There are questions here on my right side. I think the microphones are hopefully coming. It's coming from over there.
So you talked about the importance of public access for information. So public access for information is something could be granted by state institutions and law enforcement institutions. So don't you think international communities like organizations like UN and the other institutions could pressure states in developing countries and underdeveloped countries to guarantee more access of information? Don't you think this could help, like, more transparency and more like guaranteed access of information? And as you can see, we don't see such a role from the UN institutions and the whole international organizations. Well, such a great role could be played easily by those institutions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think the UN is playing that role. Two things. I mean, one is when you look at the right to freedom of expression that was established from the Universal Declaration in '48, but then through the Pact on Civil and Political Rights, the basis of freedom of expression is a right that you exercise in two dimensions, we say. It gives you the right to access information through all means, and then to disseminate and impart information and ideas. And one cannot go without the other, because you have to access information to be able to develop your mind and your thoughts, and to be able to express them. And I always said as rapporteur, by the way, that this is done individually. You have an individual right to access information and express yourself. You have a collective right. You can associate and form an association to investigate and express. But it's also a right we have as peoples. The peoples of a nation have a right to express their identity, their values, their culture, their traditions as well. And this is crucial. But this exists, and it is in all the structure of universal human rights. And it has been systematically insisted at the Human Rights Council. Whether some nations are paying, some states and some governments are paying attention or not is very tragic. There's still, again, the idea that freedom of expression is still being denied. Bloggers are still being detained. Journalists are being arrested. Today was mentioned this morning at the opening of this session. So yes, some states are reacting against it, but the principles are there. And more recently, I was saying, the General Assembly of United Nations approved the 2030 Agenda on the Sustainable Development Goals, where Goal 16 is. This was very recent, and this was by consensus of all nations in the United Nations. And they agreed that access, and it not only said, initially it said access to public information, which is a right to know what the state authorities do, but then they changed the wording to something broader, which is public access to information, which includes all forms of information. That was a big debate, but at the end they agreed. So no, I think there is a debate in the UN bodies. Now, the UN bodies cannot enforce that. This is a political decision that all states made, and that they should live to by themselves, and that societies should keep them up to that. And I think this is part of the call that we all receive at this moment to enhance this information.
And we will keep reporting on that as DW News. Thank you very much, Mr. La Rue. Thank you very much. This is your applause.
One thing I wanted to correct is I don't support the right to be forgotten.
We just talked about the right to be forgotten, but that's a whole new topic. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard so much about social media and social reporting, the new challenges, but also the new opportunities. And now I can promise you some action. Get ready for Yusuf Omar. He's an award-winning senior social reporter based in CNN's London's bureau, and his career began in 2010 when he actually hitchhiked from South Africa to Damascus with nothing but a very small camera and his smartphone to tell his story. Yusuf was named Mobile Journalist of the Year in 2016, and what I really love about his work is that he never gets tired for using social media for social good. I do hope we find that spirit over the next 3 days here in many panels and discussion groups, because I really think we shouldn't focus on the threats, mainly on the threats of this internet, but really on the opportunities and the potential to really make the world a better place. Yusuf Omar, where are you?
The Manchester attack, the London attack, the elections in the UK, an apartment that caught on fire where dozens were killed, and of course the attack that you guys saw in the early hours of this morning. You must have woken up to pedestrians being knocked down by what appeared to be a van. It has been an incredibly busy time to be a journalist, and the decisions that we've had to make have never been more complicated. As a journalist, when I get into the field, what do I do? Do I do a tweet? Do I do a GIF? Do I write a post for CNN.com? Do I do a 16:9 video for television? Do I do a 360-degree video? Can I get you to hold that? Oops.
Yes, of course.
There's so many decisions to make. Those decisions are partially based on, you're also on camera, right? It's 360, so smile. Those decisions are partially based on analytics. What has done well in the past? We can gauge what will do well in the future. It's also based on gut feeling. As editors, as journalists, we know what kind of stories to do in what kind of situations. But increasingly, it's becoming so complicated because there's so many platforms and so many technologies. I'm here to tell you that for my generation, the camera is the new form of communication. We do not engage with technology using keyboards. We do not engage with technology using words. We use our cameras to talk. And we increasingly need to be looking at this new wave of innovation in the way that we do journalism. I'm here to tell you that the biggest fundamental shift since the television is two formats that you guys need to pay attention to right now. One of them is the stories format, and you'll find it on Instagram, you'll find it on Facebook, you'll find it across the top of every social media channel right now, the stories format. And the other one is the democratization of live video. Absolutely everyone is now going live from their phones with 4G internet. As we approach 5G internet and high-speed connections, we can expect my generation to be live all the time. I'm the generation that gave you the toilet selfie. We overshare everything. And we overshare because it's largely empowered us. We've seen revolutions rise. We've swiped right through Tinder and found jobs. It's enabled us in our lives. And this is why we are willing to share so much information. I'm a mojo. I'm a mobile journalist. I call myself a jeans journalist. Everything I need to tell a story should fit into my jeans. I work for CNN. I'm part of the social publishing team as a reporter, specifically working on Snapchat and emerging platforms. Just so you guys understand how CNN's social media works, how it breaks up, there's 3 unique divisions, and they work so seamlessly together. And we saw this play out just this morning. The CNN team are here as well, and the 3 teams were incredibly well aligned. We've got social discovery, and this is where a team of people will find content online. We've just heard that a van has hit into a group of pedestrians in London. They will source it, they will verify it, and they will clear it, and they'll say, we've got permission to use it, you guys can use it. It's an incredibly powerful part of our operation. We've then got social TV. Social TV are looking at what's playing out on CNN's television station and putting it online. And then finally, we've got social publishing, and that's what I do. CNN is on so many platforms. We're on Kick and Line and Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram and all of these different mobile spaces. We really go to where the audience is. We're not necessarily saying anymore, you guys need to come to CNN.com. No, we will go to where you are. And this is the situation we find ourselves in if you work on the social publishing team. I want to get a sense of the kind of content that you guys are digesting. If we can understand how we digest content, it's much easier for us to work out how our audiences should start consuming content. So if you guys can head to kahoot.it on your phones right now. Pull out your phones. So you're going to pull out your phones, and you're going to go to kahoot.it. Kahoot.it. This is a bit like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, like ask the audience. So you're going to go there, kahoot.it, and you're going to type in 509-5256. 509. Patrick, how many people are in the room? How many am I expecting up there? Because right now I see 0. So kahoot.it. Okay, we've got 5. We've got Simon. There we go. We've got 10. Dominic, KP, Bob, Farhan, excellent. Dan, 21. Let's get these numbers up, guys. So I want to get a sense of basically how you consume content. If it's on a mobile, if it's on a desktop, which way you watch it, how long your content is. It's these kinds of decisions that help inform the kinds of content that we do on our social media platforms on a daily basis. We've got 74. We've got 83. Now we're going. Fantastic. Should we call it at 100? All right. Thank you. All right, are you ready for the first question? You're going to be answering it on your phone. In what format do you guys watch videos online? Vertical or landscape? Sideways or upright? How do you watch them? Do you watch your phone upright or do you turn it sideways like a television? Or which one's your primary choice? Okay, 84% of you are on landscape. Perhaps you come from a television background. You're used to watching long form. My opinion on this matter is, if I'm watching sideways, it's a lean back experience. I'm watching a documentary, something a bit long. If I'm in the bus and the train, I'm leaning forward. It's vertical. Let's check out the next question. How long are the videos that you watch online? How long is the average length of the kind of videos you guys watch online? Are they 30 seconds red, 1 minute blue, 5 minutes orange, or 10 minutes green? How long are the videos you watch online? Okay, so it seems the majority of you 1 minute. That's amazing, because if we look at a NewsWhip study that was done recently, the average video length for BuzzFeed, Daily Mail Online, AJ Plus is exactly 1 minute long. So you guys are in that demographic. If they say in print you should be able to tell a story in 400 words, in a social video you should be able to do it in exactly a minute. The next question. Do you skip or fast forward? Do you ever skip through a video where you just sort of skip ahead? Yes or no? Obviously with television you don't really have that choice, do you? You just sort of, it's linear, you watch it from start to end. Okay, the vast majority of you skip videos. And this is exactly why we see this stories format that's emerged, where it's interactive. You click and skip forward every 10 seconds, like Snapchat, like Instagram, because we've become a generation that are accustomed to being interactive with our video. I don't want to watch 3 minutes if I don't want to. I want to skip ahead. And this is why the stories format has emerged. And I think it's the final question. Where do you watch videos online? In which desktop or mobile? What's your primary form of digesting video content at the moment? Is it on a desktop or is it on your mobile phone? This often depends where you are in the day. If you're in the office, you're perhaps on a desktop more. If you're commuting, you're perhaps on a mobile. If you're on the toilet, probably mobile. Okay, the vast majority on a mobile. That's no surprise to you, and that's why all of your digital strategies are talking about mobile. We need to do mobile, we need to do video, we need to do mobile. This is exactly why. This echoes CNN's values when it comes to digital journalism. Social, they want to be across all social platforms. Global, they want to be across the world. And mobile, they want to be centered around mobile devices in people's pockets. And this experience of social, global, and mobile has been something I've also echoed in my career. Starting in 2010, I wanted to be a foreign correspondent. I wanted to cover wars and natural disasters, but all of your newsrooms were shrinking. Your budgets were cutting down. You didn't want to send a young guy with no gray hairs out to cover a war zone. So I said, okay, I'll do it myself. So with a backpack full of old t-shirts, a head full of young dreams, and an old mobile phone and a camera, I hitchhiked from South Africa to Syria, from Durban to Damascus, telling stories along the way, trying to understand the African continent for myself. And nobody cared that it was shaky. Nobody cared that it was handheld. All we wanted was good stories. We've transcended the days of everything having to be on a tripod and head and shoulder interviews, just a good story. In 2012, an ammunition depot exploded in Congo, Brazzaville. Hundreds of people were killed, thousands were maimed. This time I strapped a camera to my head, a bit like these things. I'm filming you guys right now, hello. I would be able to walk around and give you a point of view. It's quite scary, you're walking. It's essentially like walking through a minefield. Around me is ammunition. Some of it's still live. But the issue with both of these formats, well, they were too fragmented. I put my YouTube video here and my WordPress there, and audiences don't migrate as much as you think they would. So in 2014, when I was smuggled into Syria with a group of doctors that were starting a hospital in Dargush, I started to combine formats, putting tweets and lives and GIFs on top of each other. Screaming in here, blood pouring out. There was a child who's been shot just below the heart. At the moment, we understand it was some sort of an accident.
It was an 11-year-old accidentally shot dead by his father. He was cleaning his gun.
I'm just getting word. And this is specifically where the stories format comes into play. The idea that we have video, and on top of video we put text, and on top of text we put geolocations, and we start to build layers on top of your video. So that's how I want you to understand the new social media stories format, as a blank canvas of which we can continually develop more and more. When I moved to India, I started playing with this format last year. And I was interviewing sexual abuse survivors, young women who had been raped. And in India, you're not allowed to show the faces of rape survivors in the mainstream media. So we gave them the phone, we had them choose face filters, these funny face filters all of your kids have in their phones, and they could hide their identities using these masks. This is about using a technology that was never designed for this purpose to do journalism. I want to give you guys a quick briefing of what the stories format looks like so you can try it out yourself. In its essence, it's a 10-second video. You're opening up into the camera and you are literally holding down the red button for 10 seconds and you're saying, hey, I'm Yusuf Omar, I'm at the Global Media Forum, and here's some text on the ground. And in a matter of seconds, we can start to produce a piece of content, a piece of video, which can then be repurposed for any of your formats in real time. People often say, well, it's only 10 seconds. How can you tell a story in 10 seconds? It's not. It's a singular shot, and a shot behind a shot behind a shot behind a shot makes a linear narrative. People say it's ephemeral. It disappears after 24 hours. So did the newspaper. We bought a new one the next day. My mother used to clean windows with my newspapers. So does the broadcast on television. It's ephemeral. The next day we have a new broadcast. And adding geolocations like the Bonn, Germany, a timestamp perhaps, all of this kind of detail helps us verify and authenticate that what people are sharing is what's happening on the ground. With timestamps, with date stamps, with location stamps, these are layers of verification. CNN have effectively used the stories format in a number of incredible spaces. Fred was flying one of our correspondents over Mosul, and he was able to capture this footage using his mobile phone from a fighter jet. Hard to reach place with a big camera, trust me. We had Will Ripley, who's in North Korea, also a difficult place to have broadcast cameras.
Big day here in North Korea. It's the 85th anniversary of the North Korean Army. There's a U.S. nuclear submarine approaching Busan in South Korea, and there's a lot of speculation about whether
using his mobile phone, creating content on mobiles and for mobile devices. And of course, the Ariana Grande concert in Manchester, I covered it using my mobile phone. I'm Yusuf Omar, and I'm at the One Love concert here in Manchester, meeting some of the fans. But of course, the actual potential behind this technology, the stories idea of vertical videos that people are producing, is not in Yusuf Omar or one person holding down their phone and being a selfie journalist. No. It's in curation and aggregation and listening to millions of people's stories all the time and being able to create meaningful content out of that. That is where the value add is. And this is what we've seen time and time again. We all missed the US elections. None of us saw it coming. The polls got it wrong. The pundits got it wrong. If you'd looked in the right places on social media, you might have found signs that would have helped you predict the US elections. If you looked at the amount of people that searched vote Trump on the week of the US elections, it was almost twice as much as those that searched vote Hillary. If you looked on Snapchat, they were curating the videos of millions and millions of young people and getting an idea of their sentiment, how they were feeling, who they may be voting for.
And to celebrate the peaceful transition of power in our democracy.
This is 2017. This is Trump's America.
This is just more sources. It's like being able to do voxies of the entire world and gather meaningful information that we can use to help do better journalism. During the French elections, young French people were able to have communications with politicians. And during the Paris attack, some of the first footage that CNN had access to was from a Snapchat story. CNN found the same thing around the Ariana Grande concert when the bomb happened. We were looking on YouTube, and we were looking on Facebook, and we were looking on Twitter, but the generation that were there were broadcasting on different platforms. They were on Instagram, and they were on Snapchat. And our discovery team is rapidly having to move to new formats and new technologies to work out where young people are broadcasting. Unfortunately, traditional media have been really late onto this curation game. We've tried to be the sole arbiters of journalism and reporting and trying to send broadcast cameras out. And in that process, social media platforms have leaped ahead in the ability to aggregate stories. Having said that, I believe if we invest time in empowering communities around us with mobile journalism skills, they already have phones. If we teach them how to tell stories on their phones, we can create verified, authenticated communities who can then supply us with content. When I was in South Africa, I lived there for 6 years. I got 12 young millennials, managed to get them iPhones, and we trained them up in a boot camp. We then sent them back to their rural communities, sent them back to the townships, sent them back to the places where we weren't getting access to stories on the fringes of our news radar. When I was working in India at the Hindustan Times, we wanted to tell the story of education, but it's the same boring story every year, you know, and the students apply, so we trained them up in Snapchat, and they told their own story. And you ended up getting such personal narratives about their sex lives and politics with their families, and it became a reality show, and those guys are still enabled. We can turn that resource on at any time. We can say, hey, we need a story in education, and we've got 6 students who are embedded in campuses who can provide us with information. We wanted to tell the story of sanitation, and we trained up a bunch of waste pickers, 20 waste pickers in India.
Hold down the white button for 10 seconds and take a video. We're doing a mobile journalism session here in the Zambezi with the community.
He says, I'm not going to give up because
So
I need
this
to
was on
eat.
Instagram stories. They all had phones in their pockets. Data was an issue. We came up with solutions to that, and we enabled waste pickers in the communities around Delhi to tell their own stories. So now I've told you a whole bunch of stuff, and you're probably wondering, well, we want to do this. So how do we build a mobile journalism newsroom? I'm going to give you 7 very quick steps because I've probably got about 7 minutes left, so let's be fast. Write these down. Number 1, remove the Zs. I find in most traditional news organizations, there's a series of Zs in the workflow. I shoot a piece of content on my phone, and then I have to send it up to a video editor. And then I have to send it up to the online team. And they have to send it up to the social media team. And finally, it makes it online. This is largely a television legacy that we've adopted, and there was good reason for it. It built quality. But where possible, let's look for opportunities and trust to allow people to broadcast directly from their mobile device up to your platforms, up to your Facebook, up to your YouTube, raw, authentic content. Of course, people say, well, Yusuf, what about quality? How do we make sure that what's going up is authenticated and it's being fact-checked? And, you know, I think you have to take a traffic light approach to social media. We can't regard all stories as being the same, and we can't have the same policies for all. For example, if you are filming this right now, it's relatively frivolous. It's a fluff story. It's a green light. You're not going to get sued. Why not give that reporter access? If they've caught a minister pants down in a brothel, red light. Let's bring those Zs back in. Let's reintroduce that workflow. And this is something that I've been driving home for a while. Number 2 is survey the newsroom. Get a sense of what mobile devices and what apps, and how I surveyed you guys, how your team are currently producing content and on what platforms they're digesting on. It'll give you a much better idea of how to enable your team. When I was at the Hindustan Times in India, we had 75 different types of phones in our newsroom alone, ranging from a $4 phone to a $700 phone. And we had to find solutions that would work across all of them. The third point is cut the fat. Look at what video formats you're already doing on your social platforms and work out which ones are successful, which ones are performing well, and cut the fat on those that are not. Say, this is not doing well, how can we make it better? We often, this idea that if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. And it's the same for social media. Look at your current existing formats and how we can make them better. Point number 4 is gamify your newsroom. I often see we hand out devices and gear to everybody, and we say, okay, everyone become mobile journalists. It doesn't quite work like that. I think it's far more powerful if you reward people based on the work they do. If you get 100,000 views on a Facebook video, here, have a tripod. If you get 500,000 views, here's a new iPhone. If you get 1 million views, here's a 360 camera. 5 million views, here's a drone. And you end up enabling people with gear. It's sort of like a pyramid scheme, isn't it? And as you climb up this channel, maybe you get rewarded with access to platforms too. You've got 500,000 views. You've clearly proven that you're a reporter that can be trusted to do good journalism in the field of the mobile phone. Here's access to our Twitter account. You can now manage that for your team. You've got 5 million views. You're clearly very, very good. You're an influencer. Here's access to our Facebook account. And in doing so, you don't create these silos of social media teams, which are always saturated anyway, but you end up fragmenting that into your newsroom, where your business team has a social media presence, and your sports team, and everyone does. My next point is work out what is performing best based on a return on investment, and focus on that. So in my personal capacity, on my personal accounts, I find that live broadcasting works well for me. I find that it doesn't require much effort in terms of video editing and that. It has the highest return on investment in terms of I get about 10 times more comments on a live broadcast than I do on a standard video. And that's why it's the bottom of my pyramid. I then do stories, which is the format I talked to you about. I then look at the wires and see what can be repurposed. And much higher in my storytelling pyramid do I start focusing on more curated explainer journalism and 360-degree videos and these sorts of formats. But you have to work out what to do in which scenario, because, again, there's too many formats. The next is pick a day. Pick a day of the week that you want to do training. For me, I used to call it Mojo Mondays, Mobile Journalism Mondays. And that's a day where everybody in the entire company is welcome to come. Everybody from the cleaners to the editor-in-chief, because you don't know Who's going to be there when a big story happens? Since 9/11, it hasn't been big broadcast cameras that have been bringing us the biggest stories of our time. It's been people with mobile phones. So increasingly, I'm saying pick a day of the week and empower everybody to become mobile journalists, because we all are. And my final point on this, point number 7, is the social format. This is not television, so stop treating it like television. You need to design entirely new ways of telling stories. And have I got another minute? Can I show them something? Yes. Okay, I'm going to show you guys just how fast it is to create a piece of content using a phone. Follow this workflow. You can do it yourself. Try it at home. Open up your camera. You're going to be in landscape. Go to video. And hey, I'm at the Global Media Forum. There's an incredible group of people. They all are wearing suits. I'm wearing trainers. It's a bit awkward, but it's glad to be here. Thanks for having me. Cool. So she's going to get a cutaway of the audience, because I've just spoken about the audience. Maybe we'll get a cutaway of this, because we're at the Global Media Forum. Like that. And we're going to go into iMovie. Oh, and the shoes. Sorry about that. Do you know how difficult it is to keep white shoes white? You have no idea. And you're going to jump into iMovie, and we're going to put a baseline narrative down. So open a new file, movie. Going to take the link, the PTC, the piece to camera, the stand-upper. Every country's got a different way of saying to be on camera, basically. And we're going to overlay it with visuals. We're going to take our wide shot, and we're going to press the overlay button, and we're going to stick it down like that. And we're going to keep going. And within a couple of seconds, you put the shoes, put the sign down. That should be enough, and you can put the music down. And we're going to put a track in, and we're going to press the done button. And we can press done up the top left and play, and that's it. We've produced a video. I'm at the Global Media Forum. There's an incredible group of people. They all wearing suits. I'm wearing trainers. It's a bit awkward, but it's glad to be here. Thanks for having me. Fantastic. Well done to you. My final message. Ignore the gimmicks. Social media is full of gimmicks. Look for the storytelling tools to do better journalism. More perspectives, more angles, more people with more phones can only mean more truths, and that is better journalism. Thank you very much.
And this is Omar, Yusuf. Thank you very much. What a great performance. I just looked in the faces of our Director General and our money minister, so to speak. I think that the tension will rise to produce much more, much faster. But I also want to give a big applause to Sumaya Sedat, who did all these really small and fast and easy editing. And if you don't have enough of these two people, Yusuf and Sumaya will give another workshop on Wednesday, so look out for that. And now I should give you a sign, so music up.
Good morning and welcome to Zambezi News. My name is Jerome Weathers.
I am Mandape.
And I'm Kudzaishe Mshayembe. We'd like to thank you for joining us here at Zambezi News. We're Zimbabwe's leading news station. We're also Zimbabwe's only news station.
Yes, as the old adage goes, two is a crowd where stations are concerned. And besides, our patriotic ruling party owns the broadcasting authority anyways. And who wants to hear dirty opposition voices on TV? Eh?
We put the proper in propaganda. We put the swag in news wagon.
We bring you the news fresh, like a 93-year-old president who has withstood the test of time.
We come from the land of eternal youth, eternal presidents, and a non-currency. And now in our headline news, ZANU-PF celebrates election victory ahead of the scheduled 2018 elections. The opposition calls the celebrations rigged.
And we travel to Europe to uncover this fake news phenomenon. Because what you call fake news, we just call the 8 o'clock bulletin.
In fact, when it comes to faking news, we are the funkiest at faking. We are the mother fakers. I do find it quite funny, though, when we come here and you hear the West accusing Russians and Africans of creating fake news, when in fact, I mean, they're the pioneers of it. I mean, remember all the CNN and crew reporting on the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq back in the day? And where were your investigative journalists ahead of the 2008 financial crash, huh? In bed with the system, maybe?
Join us after the short commercial break.
Tired of the numerous choices you are forced to make in the supermarket day in, day out? Do I choose the cheese and onion flavor? Do I choose tomato? Well, we've got just the brand for you. Dictator chips. You will never ever choose again. Dictator chips have been a big hit across parts of the world for centuries. So why stop now? Made with one organic potato that can grow in any town or village given the right tense conditions and economic frailty, the Dictator chip gives off the illusion of being tastier than any other chip. And boy, do they do a good job. They come in only one flavor, and each pack comes with, you guessed it, a single crisp cut from the same potato. Talk about a chip of the old block. The best thing about Dictator chips is that they just get better and better with age. Left a Dictator chip in the cabinet for 3.5 decades? Not a problem. Just dip it in some of our new Dictator's hip sauce and voila! The Dictator chip tastes as full-flavored and authoritatively delicious as ever before. So what are you waiting for? Pop down to your nearest supermarket and get yourself a pack. Feeling lazy? Don't worry about it. We are sending lifetime supplies to every citizen's home as we speak, whether you like it or not. Please read pack for reducted details. Ingredients include antisocial behavior, a bitter grudge, an insatiable hunger for power, and of course, the right potato for the job.
Somewhere in the heart of the Midwest.
I've got to save Africa.
You're so selfless, honey.
A dream must be fulfilled, a risk taken. Famine Pictures presents a heartwarming tale of bravery and sacrifice. He killed thousands, single-handedly. He saved the entire continent, and they didn't even know from what. In fact, they hadn't even asked for his help. The entire cast died around him. But he survived. One man, alone, in Africa. One man, one quest, thousands of powerless extras, and 11 years in the making. White Night rising in a dark continent. Coming soon to a theater near you.
Some of Jerome's kith and kin there, huh?
I'll have you know that my ancestors are more the outdoorsy explorer types, Mandape. We discovered things like Victoria Falls and the lesser-known pigeon tribes of the Okavango Delta.
The bastards.
That sounds a bit like some post-truth reporting to me, Jerome.
Well, I mean, I must say, it's been a tough few years for freedom of expression, you know, with journalists being targeted in the line of duty and increasing terrorist attacks in Europe.
That's true. I mean, recently the Manchester bombings. It goes back to even before Charlie Hebdo.
Je suis Charlie. I remember changing my Facebook picture many a times in solidarity, but yet to...
Well, Africans have a tendency of standing in solidarity with nations under terror. Our media covers it. However, when a mall is blown up in Kenya or there are attacks in Nigeria, that doesn't seem to make it into Western media.
Yeah, but I mean, there's always so much happening in Europe and America. You can't just fit in all that little African news sideways.
Like a Kardashian building an international school of Botox on our continent. Besides that, our continent doesn't seem to exist.
You see, this is why I think fake news and propaganda is better than omitted news or erased news. Because if Africa is not for sale, then it's hardly in the media. And besides, where Africa is concerned, think about it.
No, you're right, Manap. I mean, you know, there's so much conflict in the West, but you never hear of poverty-stricken Europe or war-torn Flint, Michigan.
We now cross over to a report by Kefas Josfats, who's somewhere in Germany.
Europe is being hit by the winds of change with Brexit and the election of a one-year-old party in France. Change is happening across the continent as it seems the European Union is falling apart. I caught up with one or two Europeans to ask them about what they thought.
Yeah, well, you see, we want change in Europe. We've got too many immigrants coming in.
The problem is you want change. Why not just stick with the devil why not just stick with what you know? We have a 93-year-old leader, and we haven't had change since 1980, and everything is fine.
That's good old Kefas Josfats there.
You boys, don't worry, I'm coming just now. Just stay there.
We weren't expecting anyone to be joining us. It sounds like the Minister of Impending Projects.
Definitely impending.
He's definitely the minister we fear the most after the Minister of Information and TV licenses.
Yeah. You guys, get off the stage with your fake news. Useless. Yes, right. Thank you very much for gathering at this rally. Whatever this is. I am the Minister of Impending Projects. I'm here on an image sprucing mission for my country, Zimbabwe. Yes. Now, what is my ministry all about? Let me explain to you. First of all, in my country, my people come to me with their projects, be it manufacturing, horticulture, yes, things like that. They bring them to me, I look at them, and then I file them. That's all. If you want something to happen, that's the Ministry of Projects. I am impending projects. Do you see the difference? Excellent, very good. Now, as I was saying, I'm here to tell you that Zimbabwe is open for business. And we are going to have a very harmonious parliamentary and presidential election next year. So you, the Western media, should, come over and cover our victory celebrations. Don't come before the elections, as we will still be counting our chickens before they hatch. And don't come during the elections as well, because we'll still be beating people. We'll be conducting voter education. Yes. In fact, it's better if you don't come at all. Yes, I think that is better, yes. Just follow the proceedings on my Snapchat account. That's at Big Ministry Bowling for regular updates on our victory celebrations. I love this Snapchat thing. If I happen to mistakenly divulge certain secrets about our party, they are deleted automatically in 24 hours. Better than this Twitter thing that some presidents prefer to use after midnight. And then it comes back to haunt them. Kofefe. What is that? Anyway, I thank you all for coming to this event. Okay, he says it's Jerome something or other. I don't know what he's saying at all. Yeah, and as for that little British-sounding one that was here earlier, he's been sent back for re-education on how to patriotically report. Yes. So thank you very much, all of you, for attending this rally. Yes, thank you. I thank you, I thank you, I thank you. And all the ladies, I especially thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Now you guys.
Don't miss the Daily Wrap-Up by Zambezi News on Tuesday at 11:15. Stay tuned.
Experience the future of media at the Deutsche Welle Global Media Forum. Alternative facts, willful deception, deliberate lies. Welcome to the era of post-truth politics, where dishonesty is a virtue and mendacity rules. In this toxic environment, the media should be a beacon of truthfulness. So how come it is distrusted by so many? Join our discussion on the proliferation of lies, media in the era of post-truth politics, here at the Global Media Forum 2017.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to our moderator, Terry Martin.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Terry Martin. I'm a senior news anchor at DW News in Berlin, and it's a great pleasure for me to be back here moderating the opening panel discussion at the Global Media Forum. We're kicking off our discussions this year with a topic that has been around for ages, but it's taken on an entire new dimension in the wake of the U.S. presidential election. I think you already know what we're talking about here. It's something that's very fundamental to our work in the news profession. We're talking about nothing less than truth and the degree to which truth matters in public and political discourse. It's a battle, if you will, between reason and rational argument on the one hand, and raw emotion on the other. It raises some really interesting questions. First of all, what happens to a society when opinions become more important than facts? And how does the media deal with this in an ethically responsible way? This is a big question for us. How does the media deal with this situation in an ethically responsible way without losing our audience and while retaining our relevance? That we're confronted with these questions at all at the Global Media Forum this year marks a real reversal in the way we think of media in the digital age. Because, as you all know, just a few years ago, it seemed that information technology was going to unleash a revolution of citizen journalists who could expose corruption and repression wherever they saw it in real time, sweeping away repressive regimes and ushering in a new political era. But today, things look very different. It's like the dark forces have prevailed, and we're living in a confusing world of social bots, fake news, and alternative facts. It's no wonder that language authorities in Britain and in Germany, too, declared post-truth and post-faktisch to be the words of the year last year. The relevance of reputable journalism is being called into question. And as journalists, we're compelled to re-examine what we're doing, what our mission is, what our methods are, and what our role is in society. Now, that's a big part of what we're going to be doing here at the Global Media Forum over the next 3 days. We're going to be doing a lot more interesting stuff, too, but we're going to get the discussion started right now with the help of an academic, an activist, and 3 journalists from 3 very different parts of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Amanda Bennett. of the U.S. She's director of the government-funded multimedia news source Voice of America. She was previously executive editor of Bloomberg News and has worked extensively as an investigative reporter in the past, winning a Pulitzer Prize with her colleagues while at the Wall Street Journal. Jason Hanan of Canada. He's an associate professor of communications at the University of Winnipeg, and he's the editor of the fascinating book, Truth in the Public Sphere, which I've begun to read. I recommend it to everyone. It addresses the role of truth in various pursuits, including journalism. Mohammad Hashemi from Iran is chief editor for the English and Arabic online services of the Iranian foreign broadcasting service Press TV. He's been working as a journalist in Iran for over a decade, and I know he spent some time also here in Germany doing an internship and learning the tools of the trade here in this country. Ladies and gentlemen, Mohammad Hashemi. Carmen Perez of the U.S. is national co-chair of the Women's March. That's a protest movement that mobilized some 5 million people around the world following President Trump's inauguration. Carmen, are you with us? Here she is. Marvelous. Okay. We're scattered all around in this round forum. Carmen Perez. She's also executive director of the Gathering for Justice, by the way. She might be telling us a little more about that. And finally, Rana Sabah of Jordan. She's executive director of Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism. That's a media network promoting accountability journalism in 9 Arab states. She was formerly chief editor of the Jordan Times and has worked as a correspondent for the Reuters news agency and the Times of London. Thank you all for being here. A big round of applause for all these people who have come from different parts of the world, like many of you, to join us for this discussion. Great to see you all. I'd like to get things started with you, Jason, because you have an overview. Yeah, here you have your microphones just beside you, by the way. Jason, I've been reading your book, and you talk a lot about how we got where we are now in historical terms. You look particularly at the U.S., what's gone on there, but the implications are truly global. When we talk about what do we mean, and how did we get here?
Okay, so I think, is this on?
Yeah, okay. I think so.
So I think when we refer to a post-truth era, we're talking about a public discourse in which the ideals of truth, logic, and objectivity have become secondary, if not entirely irrelevant. But the question about what's the source of the problem, like why did it arise in the first place, I think is much older than Donald Trump, sorry to mention his name. I think it's much older than George Bush and the Iraq War. I think the roots of the problem lie with the introduction of screens into mass culture.
When you say screens, what do you mean?
Television. So the moment that a politician or a journalist begins to care more about their physical appearance or their haircut than the factual and logical content of what they have to say, that's when we get the beginning of the decline of truth as an ideal from public discourse.
Well, that sounds like superficiality, but it doesn't sound like the disappearance of truth. Why should that necessarily translate into that?
It's not automatically the disappearance of truth. It's just the beginning of the decline. The introduction of screens is the beginning. Then there's a second revolution in mass culture, which comes with the rise of social media. And that has played a huge role in the proliferation of lies and the decline of truth as an ideal.
Social media, okay. So we've got a situation where the introduction of television into mass media and the introduction of another technology, social media driven by the internet, of course, is beginning to change the dynamics. But what about truth? Why is truth at risk here? I'm just going to ask, I have to follow up with this truth question because this seems to be what's getting lost and why we are so concerned.
Well, okay, to take the paradigmatic example, which would be the United States, I think what we're seeing now is the disappearance of a democratic culture and the and its replacement with a kind of ideological tribalism, where it doesn't matter whether your favorite politician, it doesn't matter whether they're factually correct or not, you identify with them for ideological loyalty.
Okay, so this feeds into the notion of a social bubble, too, that we've heard about this morning. There's a lot of talk about logarithms in Facebook and confirmation bias, how we are essentially fed the news today because we can be so selective that confirms our biases and ideological leanings. Rana, is the Arab world experiencing its own post-factual moment, or is this really a phenomenon that's limited to, say, North America and the English-speaking world if you factor in what went on with Brexit?
I'm not going to get... Can you hear me?
I can.
I'm not going to get into who started this first, but I think the Arabs get a lot of credit for starting that first. I think the Arab world gets a lot of credit for passing on the bug to Donald Trump, who today, in a way, is as dictatorial as most of the Arab leaders. I think the Middle Easternization of the United States media has become very much a fact today. And I think all the tricks and tools that we have been using in the Arab world have become part of the mainstream media in the United States. So yes, unfortunately or fortunately, the Arabs have exported something to the United States, and instead of just getting things from them and implementing them blindly. I think the latest battle or crisis or war between the Gulf states, it's a bit like a mafia that suddenly falls apart and everyone is just attacking the other. They're disputing the spread of terror. I think most of them are equally responsible for spreading terror. It's not just one country collectively. The origins of Wahhabism is not a product of one Gulf state. It's the product of at least 3 Gulf states. And if you look today at the media and how the media has been taking disgusting stances in this war, I mean, tells a lot. Even countries that are not part of the Gulf have now to curry favor to the Saudis, because then if they don't do this, they will cut off the funds that they badly need. I will take the example of an Egyptian newspaper.
Now, you've jumped into a really difficult can of worms, if you will, when you are talking about what's going on in Qatar. I will just kind of try to bring this back a little bit to truth in reporting and how it might be undermined. In the case of Qatar, we know that this also involves an alleged hacking of a computer system in Qatar. There was also a news bulletin issued regarding Qatar's relations with Iran, and this was then retracted, and then it was spread. And there's all sorts of accusations back and forth about where this came from. But it's now become a massive, massive problem, political issue that is being attributed to a bit of what some are calling fake news. It's getting back into that example, and I don't want to get into the power battle for supremacy between Iran and Saudi Arabia in the region at this point, because that's a whole other can of worms. But I am interested with your reporting in the 9 Arab countries where you are active. Is this something that happens a lot, where you have genuine fake news, or fake news that is then denied and called fake?
I mean, I've been working as a journalist for the past 33 years. I worked for the local media and I worked for international news organizations like Reuters for 12 years. And I can tell you it's pretty much part of the culture. I mean, before we had the electronic, the ability to serve the internet, you know, we had like the pro-government papers. Everything was pro-government. 1 TV station, 1 radio station, and 5 pro-government newspapers. Today, the problem is there are so many media outlets across the Arab world that call themselves independent, but they are either funded by businessmen that want to become officials or politicians or ministers, by political parties, Muslim Brotherhood and the likes, and by, you know, people that really want to rise to glory. So the whole thing has been exposed with the internet, and whatever they like to call themselves, free media, independent media, they're all basically in bed with the regime, with the intelligence, with political parties with the Muslim Brotherhood. So there's nothing called independent.
So it's hugely biased, in your opinion, and the idea of fake news is embedded in the culture?
Sure, and of course, you know, in our part of the world, if you look at our school syllabus, there is no inch of critical thinking, because if we had critical thinking embedded in us as kids, most of these Arab rulers would not be able to rule us so peacefully. Of course, religion also does not teach you to think in a critical way. Everything that the priest tells you or the sheikh tells you, you take for granted. And now we also have this, you know, the new division within religions and, you know, the extreme clergymen like taking over. So I think there has been a total paralysis of the Arab brain. And I'm talking here about the mass culture. I would also like to say that in the Arab world, before the so-called Arab Spring, we did have something that we call the electronic warfare, and it's basically the intelligence in many Arab countries, or the army, or the police, or the government, or the palace, or the king, or the queen, setting up their own battalions that would attack anybody that would come close to them. So we really like...
You mean in the public sphere?
Of course.
Okay.
We call them al-kata'ib al-a'lamiyya, or the electronic battalions.
Yeah, I'm sure there's much we can learn from what's going on there as well. Amanda, you're sitting in the hot seat to some degree today because you're working in an environment in the United States that is really highly pressurized now in terms of the media environment. Has the media failed in America?
Let me answer a slightly different question, because I, on this panel, I think I would dispute the idea that we are in a post-truth society, that there is no such thing as truth. I think we have way too easily panicked and given up on the idea of truth. I mean, I don't dispute your findings that there are such things as social bubbles, there's passionately held views, there's partisanship, there's attempts to do propaganda. None of these things mean that truth does not exist.
Well, as Jason defined it, just to in all fairness, the idea of post-truth being an environment in which emotions count more than facts, when opinions count more than facts.
And as soon as we start to believe that, the profession of all the journalists in here suddenly becomes irrelevant. And I think most of us...
Which is why we're talking, yeah.
Well, and I think that most of us would still want to believe that truth exists, that it is accessible, that it is distributable, that we can do it, we can... You know, one of the things that I think is very interesting is whenever I've been in one of these rooms about post-truth, there's an underlying assumption that we here in the room understand truth, but that our audiences are somehow less experienced, less sophisticated, and much more gullible than we are, and that they fall for these things. So that we have truth, we're trying to helplessly put it out to a rather, you know, I wouldn't say stupid, but a rather gullible audience. When I find that, you know, as I've been researching this, I think the actual opposite is true. I think people do tend to recognize truth. I mean, I lived for a period of time in a period of one of the most repressive media climates in the world in post-Cultural Revolution China. And my experience there was, even though the truth was, you know, relentlessly suppressed, there was a widespread feeling among the people that they just weren't getting the right story. They viscerally understood that they were not hearing truth. And you see, leaping forward, do you guys all remember the derailment of the high-speed train in China when the media said nothing happened here. And yet what happened was, because of social media, people were able to observe what was happening. They understood that they were not being told the truth. They spread that around, and the general population's view that they were not hearing the truth suddenly ignited, and it became a huge scandal. So when propaganda or massaged information comes in contact with people's own experience, they recognize it as not truth. I think it's a very dangerous thing that we are doing, to accept the idea that there's even such a thing as fake news. News is not fake. There is propaganda, there's manipulation, but there is a truth, and we here, because we're journalists, we intrinsically and implicitly believe there is such a thing.
Yes, we do, indeed. And I wholeheartedly recommend the introduction to Jason's book, where he does a review on truth and the whole notion of epistemology. And I'm sure there are indeed in our room a lot of people who know a lot more about this than I do, about the nature of truth. But I think what we're talking about is the role that factual reporting plays versus statements that are patently false, even from the President of the United States, and which has unleashed a whole army of fact checkers who say, look, this is not true. This is not true in terms of, is it verifiable or not? And it doesn't seem to be. I'm just wondering how what is happening in the United States in terms of serious media trying to deal with that.
You just talked about it. Now, I love the previous presentation of all the fast and interesting and young ways of doing things. And I wrote down a bunch of things I'm going to take back to my newsroom. But I would say that one of the things that we are missing and I think returning to, and you can see in the US media, is all the traditional journalism values that are the weapons we have against all these things, which is slowing down, doing reporting, doing research, being rigorous and relentless in seeking the other side of the story. And I will right here give a shout out to my colleague here, because American media did miss the Trump revolution. We did miss it completely, and part of it because we were in our own media-induced echo chamber, our own thought bubble. And I would like to say, and I'd like you all to give a big round of applause to the one person that I know in the media who did not miss that, and that's Inez Pohl here of Deutsche Welle, who took a car across the United States and came back and said, you guys aren't getting it. You guys aren't getting it. And what was she doing? She was reporting our traditional media values. Reporting, testing, fact-checking, putting aside our own desires and beliefs to look at the desires and beliefs of other people with whom we may not agree. Traditional reporting values exist. We've just gotten away from them. The problem isn't out there. The problem is in here.
Okay, so it's a question of values. Mohammed Hashemi, you work in a different environment in Iran, very different to the media environment in the United States. To what degree is the crisis in U.S. political discourse, public discourse, media, a topic for the Iranian media?
Actually, since Mr. Trump came into office, as you know, Iranian had a revolution in 1979, and since then they have always said that the United States is a great Satan, I just quote. And the US has always, the Iranian revolutionaries and the Iranian establishment has always considered US as unreliable, untrustworthy, and just breaking its own commitments, as just like we saw during the latest Iran nuclear deal, when Donald Trump just said the Iranian didn't keep up with their commitment, and they just broke the spirit and letter of the Iran deal, which was something totally incorrect. And I would say the presidency of Donald Trump have proved all the things that the Iranian leaders have said over the past 38 years. All these qualities have now been proved to be true.
Well, again, I don't want to focus on Donald Trump, the person. That could be another discussion, but rather the effect that the Donald Trump presidency and the statements that he's made, which often turn out to be not true, how this is playing in the Iranian press. If you want to take that, or the crisis of culture surrounding that whole discussion.
Some analysts believe that the Iranian people are the most pro-American people in the Middle East, and they just like the United States. But when the press now sees Donald Trump as the most hated leader in the United States. And because he has talked about regime change, he has talked about, he has accused the Iranian government of supporting terrorism, and just a day after the Iranian people took part in a highly turnout and highly ferocious debate and election, that something that we do not have in our region, we have not seen, then Donald Trump went to Saudi Arabia and just said, okay, let's isolate Iran.
Okay.
And in answer to your question, these things have had a great impact in terms of the Iranian press and media criticize Donald Trump and also the public.
Okay. What about in Iran itself? When, say, one of your leading politicians, be it the president or the supreme leader, makes a statement that is patently false, verifiably, simply not the case, how do you deal with that?
Let me give you an example. A group of high valued politicians from Korber Stiftung in Germany paid a visit to our channel, Press TV, and they just asked the same question, that can you criticize your leader, Ayatollah Khamenei? I answered them, we have mechanism in Iran. It's not like that all the people says that you cannot criticize the leader. We have mechanism in Iran, as long as it is not disrespectful of the leader. People can criticize the officials in terms of making, let's say, false remarks and false comments. Let me give you examples. One of the for example, the hot issue of hijab over headscarves in Iran, that I know VOA has covered it very broadly, and they have made a lot of programs about this still see freedom in Iran, which I do not agree with that. You see, for example, with the issue of hijab, as we know, the Iranian officials and the top echelon of leadership believes in hijab, okay? But at the same time, there are people in Iran that take issue with hijab, and they are part of the government, part of the system, but they criticize whether hijab in Iran should be forceful or not.
So there is room for debate
there
within
is
a
room
carefully
for
defined
debate. There are
parameters.
carefully defined parameters.
Okay.
Another one.
Good. Well, I just want to bring Carmen in here for a moment, so she can contribute. Carmen, you've been very involved in activist movements around the world for decades, fighting for justice in all sorts of ways and places. In your work as an activist, emotion obviously plays an important role. Facts play an important role. And when we're talking about the post-truth era, as flawed as that term is, we're just wondering what it means in your work. Do you see a shift away from rational discourse and reason in terms of its power to motivate people, and a shift towards emotive language, more emotive arguments that where people may not be so concerned about the facts?
Certainly. Well, I just want to say good afternoon to everyone. I'm truly honored and happy to be here to talk about what we as activists have been going through in the U.S. But I feel, one of the things that we have seen, and that I've been organizing in communities, particularly communities of color that are impacted by incarceration and police brutality and violence for the past 20 years. And so what I've seen during this time is that I think according to who you ask, you're gonna get a different answer about the media portraying communities with truth. And I say that because oftentimes, I think about the unarmed black men that are being killed at the hands of police and are being demonized and dehumanized by our mainstream media. Also the fact somebody mentioned Flint earlier. It wasn't until we were able to bring some attention to Flint that people started paying attention. And so a lot of the things that we see in our communities, particularly even with the Women's March, The day after the Women's March, we were being interviewed by Joy Reid, who is a friend, and she shared with us, well, you know, it was wonderful to see that there were about 400,000 in Washington, D.C. However, we had gotten word that there were 1 million swipes in the metro in Washington, D.C. the day that we organized the Women's March, and that there were actually 5 million people around the world. And so for us as activists, it's disheartening to turn on the TV in the morning and watch the news to then see the way in which our communities are being portrayed, because they're not factual. And so that's why I'm saying, depending on who you ask, right? We think about the people that are being deported. Under Trump, we call him number 45. We don't even call him president, because he's not our president. He's not our leader. We call him number 45. Under number 45, there have been a higher incidence of hate in our country because of that. And so, again, you know, it's really, we're relying on social media to tell our stories. We're relying on live, on real time, you know, when you know, we're turning on Snapchat, but really we're turning on Facebook Live in order for us to record what's happening in the streets, particularly when it comes to police brutality. And as we know, oftentimes what the media is showing is not the same as to what we are seeing as activists on the ground.
So would you say then that in your experience as an activist, that the pressurization and polarization of political discourse and media reporting is actually producing a positive effect in terms of people recognizing an alternative way of approaching activism? Is this drawing more people to your movement, if you will, this polarization through this discourse in the U.S.?
I certainly believe that. I mean, we saw so many people show up on January 21st. So many people got involved that hadn't been involved in movements previously. We in the USA, you know, people woke up after November 8th.
And social media was an enabling factor for you in
I
this.
think it certainly was. But also, too, I think, you know, there's a generational gap when it comes to those that are still receiving, you know, news through televisions. Oftentimes, us as millennials or even younger aren't home. We don't have time to watch the TV. Like, you know, our brother here said, you know, we're on our phones, we're on airplanes, we're traveling a lot, we're on the ground trying to capture what's happening in real time and telling the story and speaking to the mothers that are impacted by these issues. But for the most part, because of the election of number 45, we have seen a raise in activism. There are a lot more people feeling this deeper connection to other people's liberation, which we hadn't seen previously.
Okay. We have less than half an hour left to still explore our subject here, and I want to begin to move on to how to respond to this situation that we're dealing with now, particularly where opinions are being fed through channels to people, and they are able to filter out things that don't fit within their world view. Jason, what advice would you give to journalists who are working within this environment, to media organizations who are trying to preserve their respect for sound journalistic principles and operate in an environment where emotions and opinions seem to be weighted more than facts?
Sure. Well, I just want to say that I don't think that journalism is the root of the problem. When we refer to the media, we can mean one of two things. We can either mean journalism, the news, broadcasting, or we can also refer to technologies of communication. And I think the problem lies primarily with the latter. I'm not saying that journalism isn't implicated in the problem of a post-truth world. I think it is to a certain extent, but I don't think it's the root of the problem. So, I mean, my sphere of practice is education, and I think that one contribution that schools can make is by teaching, by cultivating media literacy, as well as cultivating, and we badly need this right now, social media literacy. because social media is it's a complicated tool that can be used for good or it can be used for the worst purposes. So on the one hand, it can be used for positive projects like organizing the Women's March. On the other hand, there's a dark side to it. It can be used for things like bullying and trolling. And number 45 is a troll. He has harassed fellow citizens, including in one case a 19-year-old woman who later received death threats and rape threats. So it's important, I think, for especially young people who are socialized into these technologies to learn how to think about them critically and not take them at face value.
Can I just add to what you were saying? So when we think about the Women's March and how we were able to mobilize so many people, it really started off with a Facebook post. But I want to say because of our involvement, there were 4 national co-chairs. My background is my mother's from Mexico, my father is from California, so I'm Mexican-American. Linda Sarsour is a Muslim Palestinian woman born in Brooklyn. Bob Bland is a white woman. And then Tamika Mallory is an African-American woman. We obviously utilize social media to get our message out, but at this moment, since the Women's March, we get death threats every single day. We posted something based on what happened this morning, or actually what happened last night. There was also a young Muslim woman that was killed in Virginia. And again, the thread that I have to go through, and I have to ignore it, but I also need security when I'm traveling in the US because of the fact that there are no filters. No one is monitoring Twitter or Facebook and these types of death threats that we as activists get for doing the work, whether it's peace work, whether it's Black Lives Matter work, or whether it's being in solidarity with other communities.
Rana, in the Arab world, we just heard Jason talk about media literacy, social media literacy as well. We're talking again about questions of values, because if you don't value serious factual reporting, that's not what you're going to look at. You're going to look in social media, you're going to look for sources that, again, confirm whatever bias you may have on an emotional level. Do you see this as having any potential for impact in in the areas where you work?
I mean, definitely in Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism, which is the region's only leading network promoting the culture of accountability journalism, we are very much trying to promote fact-based and fact-driven investigations that are exposing an issue of concern to the public, hoping that there will be accountability and reactions at the highest level to rectify the situation. So this is what we have been doing for 11 years, and trust me, it's not easy. In the last 3 years, for example, there is one Arab country that has witnessed a huge regression on media freedom. I have 3 nationals in my office who belong to this country, and every time they travel in and out of their country, they get stopped at the airport because they've been working for us.
You prefer not to mention the name of this country, it seems.
I prefer so because, we don't have a war starting here, because I sympathize with my fellow colleagues that know that what they are doing is not correct and that they are betraying the essence of their integrity as professionals. But unfortunately, they also want to live, and there's absolutely no solidarity from journalists who belong to that country to anything that is challenging the official version. In fact, they have become accomplices of that regime. I myself can't travel to that country anymore because I'm on their watch list. So this is one of the things that we have to constantly deal with in the Arab world. It's not just about facts, it's also about vengeance, and it's about journalists looking for their own comfort. They want to sit in the warm laps of the officials, and they don't want to be watchdogs of their societies.
Amanda, how do you deal with what's going on in the U.S. political and public discourse right now at Voice of America? You broadcast to the world, and you have a big audience, and you operate in also many different languages. Is this a topic for you when you discuss when you report on the United States?
Sure, absolutely. Just as it is with all the countries, our very existence, our ability to operate relatively safely, depends on our reputation as being a fair and impartial arbiter of news. And so we have to be incredibly careful to try and reconcile and present both sides of, or maybe both, in many cases not even both, it's many sides of issues. Again, this is one of the reasons why I reject the idea that news can be fake. That's a term that's been appropriated by other people. I think that's not a helpful term.
But you don't dispute that some things are patently false.
Of course
there's falsehood.
And you know what I find so really hilarious? I mean, there's some expectation that this is the first president who has ever told untruths to the American people. I mean, seriously? I mean, where have we been for the last 150 years?
I don't want to really. This is not a Trump bashing situation.
Of course.
But there's one point I want to bring into this so that you can also include this in your answer, and that is the advent of the dark web, where you can buy a campaign to influence an election, if you will, for example, with fake news.
And you know, I think this is going to be a hard thing to debate because we're still hotly in the middle of it, but some of the early research coming out of both Columbia University and Stanford suggests that despite the proliferation of this fake news, it really had a kind of a minimal effect on the United States election, and that in fact our kind of discomfort with the United States election is the outcome wasn't what we wanted, and that our discomfort is how could this possibly have happened because it's different than the narrative we were saying. So the fake news maybe had some effect, but it wasn't as powerful as people are saying. And so again, I'm going to say
which will be great comfort to many other governments too, I'm sure.
What?
That will be some comfort to many other governments, like Germany, which is facing an election in September, and there's a great concern about what role that might play in that election.
And you know, again, it's very hard for us to discuss this. We're right hot in the middle of it, and until we get some distance from it, we won't be able to discuss it completely. But I just said to a fellow journalist last night that once we all kind of settle down and remember who we are, remember our mission, remember the force of our mission, and go back to recommitting ourselves to the idea that truth exists, truth can be found, and truth can be conveyed, and that people out there are not less intelligent and less discerning than we are. I think this whole era is going to prove to be a great gift to journalists because it's going to force us back to doing well what we've always done well, which is checking, which is double checking, which is, again, presenting sides of the argument, presenting views into the world that we ourselves are uncomfortable with. That was, I think, where we failed and are continuing to fail in the United States and around the world. We are, you know, when I started in journalism, it was giving voice to the voiceless. Well, there is more than one kind of voiceless here, and we heard the people in the United States who felt that they were voiceless. They're people that we may not necessarily viscerally agree with, and yet our job, our mission, our role is to express their truths too, and not just the truths that we find comfortable. That's been a fundamental thing of journalism, at least ever since I got into this, before I think 3/4 of people in this room were born. The idea that that is what we do, I don't think has changed, and I think we need to go back to that. And I actually think that journalism in the United States has vastly improved since January. I mean, in January, I think we were just reacting. You know, it was like, whoa, we've never seen this before, let's be reactive. And when we settled down and went back to fact-checking, recognizing research, recognizing different viewpoints, and we haven't anywhere near gone far enough to understand that, but we've gotten much better. And I think you can look around and see that a lot of journalism, not all of it, but a lot of it has improved greatly since the beginning of the year.
So there's definitely an upside to this. We see this in terms of that you just described in the United States, for sure. Mohammed, what about in Iran? The advent of social media has also changed the media landscape in Iran, too. The movement towards citizen reporting, or whatever, the ability to share stories and ideas immediately in a network. What impact did that have on the Iranian presidential election that you just went through last month?
Actually,
Does that lead to more fact-based reporting or less?
I would say social media during the latest presidential election pushed the boundaries, all the boundaries that can be discussed in the public and online. And most of the people, I mean, the impact that social media had on the people's vote and opinion, no state media, I mean, this state TV or other states outlets had, couldn't compete with social media.
When you say social media, I mean, much of social media is blocked in Iran. What do you mean?
Actually, there is an internet intercepted messaging telegram that's over 40 million people are now using that in Iran. It is not blocked. And many of the medium like VOA and Deutsche Welle Farsi and things like that, BBC, are using this medium in order to reach out to the people. And
so it's being used by mainstream Western news organizations also to get their news up?
It is used by Western. The candidates, whether conservative candidates from conservative camp and moderate candidates, Mr. Rouhani and those conservatives, they, you might have the idea that in Iran everything is censored and like that, but I mean the conservatives who might have been in support of censorship, they realized during this election that they have to use the potential of social media. The main candidates of principalist cleric, Mr. Raisi, has his own Instagram page. And he just broadcast his campaign live on Instagram. They all opened Twitter accounts. At the same time, in the lead up to the election, the ex-president Ahmadinejad, he's a conservative principalist, hardline principalist. He just opened his own Twitter account and it reached over 20,000 followers during in a few days. And I would say these social media changed the landscape of election and had a great role in the outcome of the election. And both candidates use that. And at the same time, social media had the potential to change the way we as a state media broadcast news. For example, the speed of news being covered by social media is so high that state media in stories that when they before, for example, let's say until a few years ago went unreported, when we saw that it is now on social media, then we have to broadcast, we have to cover those stories. And I would say this has the advance and progress also on state media, whether it is website or state TV and other, other medium.
Okay, that sounds like it's also a very positive development in Iran in terms of the way things are going. So maybe things are not quite as bad as I am painting them out to be. But this is what makes also for an exciting discussion, isn't it? With Jason, the big question remains for me, in an age where everyone can choose their sources, where we have a news feed in our Facebook page, we are gravitating towards sources, again, this confirmation bias that you talk about in your book as well. And we heard from Amanda talking about values. You know, people still value truth, if you want to call it that, or factual reporting, serious reporting. The concern is that factual reporting gets lost in this desire to have one's emotions confirmed. How do we address that? How do mainstream news organizations that are just doing factual reporting say this is wrong, but not being emotive, not being tabloid, how can they retain their relevance without going tabloid? Because it sounds like the direction that things are moving is tabloid if we want to stay alive as media organizations.
Sure. So I think that the fundamental problem isn't really public cynicism towards news organizations and journalists. I think that the primary problem, at least in the United States, which again is, I think, the paradigmatic problem or case, is cynicism between citizens. If you identify as a liberal, then conservatives won't want to sit down at the same table with you. If you identify as a conservative, then liberals won't want to sit down at the same table with you. And there have been whole Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas dinners that have been ruined because Uncle Bob is a conservative, right? And so I think that one thing that news organizations can do is to host town halls, public discussions in which people of different political viewpoints can sit down with each other and have a civil conversation that is not CNN-style crossfire, like a verbal boxing match where you're supposed to somehow have a rational debate in 10 minutes with a panel of 9 people and a moderator whose job is to treat everyone like children and keep them from fighting with each other. Sorry, I have a little bias there. So I think that's one enormous contribution that news organizations can make. And as a model, I would, by way of example, refer you to the very good public discussion that CNN surprisingly hosted between Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz. That was actually a very meaningful, useful debate.
Okay, Amanda, we just about have a little bit of time, about 7 minutes left. I want to get everyone to have a kind of a concluding statement here on this topic, because I know many of you have come very long way to talk about this subject. If you were going to leave our listeners, our viewers, our audience here today with one idea about how your news organization can address this subject and what you're doing, what you hope to be doing in the future, what would that be?
I think confidence, going back to the confidence that truth exists, that dialogue is possible, that echo chambers have existed forever. I was the editor of a small newspaper in the middle of the United States where up until 50 years ago, each paper was actually run by the different political party. And there were echo chambers there. I don't think echo chambers are anything new, but that our job, it's not the problem that these things exist. We are in a profession whose job is to transcend those, and that we need to be the transcenders. And I think the idea of bringing together rational discourses is really important. The idea of recommitting to truth is important. The idea of recommitting to facts is important. That's our job. And the fact that these challenges to our job exist out in the real world should not cause us to lose faith in our job and our mission, but rather to recommit ourselves to it.
Just one quick follow-up to that. Moving forward with Voice of America in this environment, are there ways that you're considering in terms of changing the style of your output, the methods of your output, the way you work in order to assure that you stay true to your journalistic principles, but are able to retain an audience, to reach an audience and get them tuning in?
Absolutely, and I would not put the really wonderful and accessible and interesting and fun ways of communicating reality that we saw in the previous presenter. I wouldn't put those in opposition to the traditional values. I mean, we're talking about pipelines to convey information, and there are many different pipelines to convey information. These two things have been mistakenly put in opposition, and they are not. At Voice of America, we are absolutely doubling down on, I'm doing training on bias, I'm doing training on fact-checking, I'm bringing in investigative reporters to do mandatory investigative training for everybody, because all investigative journalism is good journalism practiced really, 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 really well. So the training in those techniques, the training, we are doing training in holding town halls and holding responsible discussions. We are basically, I'm just basically doubling down on traditional values and saying that presenting both sides of the story, and in many sides of the story, is our responsibility. That is our mission.
Thank you. Rana.
We will definitely continue to do investigative reporting. Everyone that has done that, and here I'm talking about 500 journalists that have practiced and concluded investigative reporting, have detected a change in their mindset, and think much higher of themselves now as journalists. We will, of course, provide all the data encryption, the safety and security assessments to everybody working with us. And as my colleague said, I think this whole problem of fake news is going to be a plus for the traditional way of doing reporting. I belong to that traditional generation where we basically had to double check at least with 3 sources every time you put a story out, just to make sure that it's the truth. It's a difficult job, but it's a lovely job, and we are a witness to the good and the bad in our societies. And I think everybody that has done investigative journalism in the Arab world and has seen that fact-driven reporting is leading to changes, sometimes very big and sometimes very small and sometimes incremental, really look at themselves differently and say, we are true journalists, and this is how journalists should be.
Thank you. Mohammed.
I would say the experience of this latest election in Iran for us can be a good example, because whether the officials, whether the Iranian politicians knew they were fighting back fake news or not, they have quite good examples. For example, in terms of exposing the disinformation by using social media. And very interesting, during the presidential election, we had 2 internet websites for fact-checking and fighting back rumors. It's shayat.ir, in Farsi it means rumors.ir, and then Faktname. They both tried to expose fake claims and fake news, whether they were right or wrong, of both the candidates.
Do people follow these?
The people follow them, and it was all them with statistics and figures, that we could click and just see how, for example, latest comment, latest remark by a candidate was wrong, and it was very interesting.
So that's already a positive development.
Yeah, I would say that was a very positive experience.
Okay, great. Carmen, you're not a journalist in that sense. You're an activist, but you're here at this Global Media Forum, surrounded by people who do work in journalism. What message would you have for us in terms of covering the issues that you are addressing in your activism work? How can we do that in a responsible way without distorting the story and still finding an audience?
The work that we do, we have a lot of allies in journalism. We do have people that give us platforms, that invite us to the newsroom so that they could highlight our stories. And I think it's just staying connected to the people on the ground that are mostly impacted by some of these issues, and continuing to write the stories in a way that's authentic. And when I think about alternative facts, it's really opinions that people have, and so doing away with some of the opinions, but really giving voice to the leaders or the community is really important. And so I always think the people that allow us to be in the newsroom, or that actually write the stories of our work, that allow us to tell the story versus it being something completely opinionated.
Okay, of course, you have your own opinion and view on things too. The challenge for journalists is when they're dealing with questions of social justice, or in your case, you're dealing with a whole range of issues. How can we tell that story in a way that is still going to find an audience? Because the best researched, most factual story has no impact if nobody reads it or watches it. How can we tell that story? Maybe that's a question I should put finally at the end, just for a brief moment, because Jason didn't really have a last word. Jason, what would your advice be, talking to all these journalists, observing what you've observed, researching it so thoroughly in this context where emotion and opinion seems to be edging out facts in terms of in the fight for an audience? What do you tell serious news organizations?
Well, again, I think that one of the greatest contributions that news organizations can make is to cultivate the spirit of democratic dialogue and civic engagement, so that we can sit down with people we disagree with, rather than feeling this impulse to physically attack them, which is what we're seeing in the United States. what happened to that young Muslim woman last night was a consequence of this fear, paranoia, and suspicion of the other. And my concern is that the spirit of civic engagement is dying in American culture as a result, not of journalism, but of social media and the kind of paranoia and cynicism that it breeds.
Thank you so much. Carmen Perez, Rana Sabat, Amanda Bennett, Jason Hanan, and Mohammed Hashemi, thank you all very much. Big round of applause for our guests. Thank you. Great stuff. Thanks a lot. I believe, let me see, is it lunchtime? Could that be? Is it 1 o'clock? We have 5 minutes? Sorry. Okay, no. So I'm just going to thank you all for being here. The Global Media Forum is underway. Enjoy the next 3 days.
Thank you. So nice to meet you.
And many thanks to Terry Martin. Ladies and gentlemen, there are 2 buffets for you, one in the restaurant and one on the Rhine level in front of room Addis Ababa. See you again at 2:30. Enjoy your lunch.
My day starts with why. Where I come from? Well, I'm not connected to one place, but my connection to all places is wherever I go, I keep asking questions. You know, as a little boy, I was the one getting on the nerves of the teachers, my parents, and my friends by asking why. This little boy is now a journalist and keeps doing one thing, asking questions. My work takes me every day to the Arab region. I see a lot of potential and energy in the younger generation. They raise their voice for issues they care for, but is anyone listening? Why aren't they part of the political decisions? Why can't they be who they want to be? And why are they not able to speak freely about everything they care for? That's why I want to give the younger generation a platform to express themselves freely, be who they want to be, and raise their questions. My name is Jafar Abdul Karim, and I work at DW.